Thank you.
Mr Mayor and councillors, on behalf of the Holroyd Christian Ministers Fellowship, my first time to be able to formally congratulate you and thank you on your election, even though we're some months down the track. A little reading from St Paul's letter to the Romans. Let everyone obey the authorities that are over him, for there is no authority except from God, and all authority that exists is established by God. As a consequence, the person who opposes authority rebels against the ordinance of God. Those who resist thus shall draw condemnation upon themselves. You must obey then, not only to escape punishment, but also for conscience sake. You pay taxes for the same reason. Magistrates being God's ministers who devote themselves to his service with unremitting care. Pay each one his due, taxes to whom taxes are due, toll to whom toll is due, respect and honour to everyone who deserves them. And so in that spirit, I pray for a successful year for Cumberland Council. Almighty ever-living God, on behalf of all citizens of Cumberland, I pray that our council continues its year of business with enthusiasm, diligence and full commitment to making Cumberland a place that is inclusive, healthy and safe. And for those in public office, I pray to you, loving God, in whose hands lies every human heart and the rights of people, that you look with favour on our Mayor, Deputy Mayor and councillors, and that throughout Cumberland the prosperity of peoples, the assurance of peace and freedom of religion may through your gift be made secure. We ask this through Christ our Lord. Amen. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend. Please remain standing for the acknowledgement of country. I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of this land, the Darug people, and pay my respects to their elders, both past and present. Please remain standing for the national anthem. Thank you, councillors. Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated. Yes, I think an apology is quite in order, probably for my own singing, but I'll take that on notice, Councillor Garrett. Mr McNulty.
Good evening, everyone. Please be advised that the open session of this council meeting will be recorded and streamed live on council's website. This recording will also be archived and be made available on council's website. Whilst all care will be taken to maintain the privacy of the public gallery, members of the public may be recorded. Council requests that all members of the public are respectful and use appropriate language.
Thank you, Mr McNulty. Apologies, I believe Councillor Sarkis is running late, but will be attending. You knowing no apologies. I'll move on to confirmation of minutes. Declarations of interest. Thank you, Mr McNulty. Are there any declarations of interest?
I have a non-pecuniary and non-significant or less than significant interest to declare that I paid a deposit in order to purchase a block of residential land in lot 11 DP 1162280 Butuwagan Drive, Cumberland.
Thank you. If you could, the appropriate officer could collect that. Sorry, it was remiss of me. I believe there are a couple of applications for leave. Councillor Hamid.
Yes, for personal reasons, Mr. Mayor. Did you, and the dates are the 21st of March,
Yes.
the 4th of April and the 18th of April.
Okay, so we have those. And are you, who's moving that? One moment, I'm doing, yeah, no, this year, thank you. I think we'll do it now if you can, yep. So do I have a mover to accept, move leave for Councillor Hamid on those dates? Moved Councillor Elmore, seconded Councillor Zareka. All those in favour? Against, declare it carried. Councillor Rami, did you just the... As
13th of March to the 23rd, 10 days.
Yes.
I'll be overseas.
Okay. Can I have a motion? Move Councillor Zareka, seconded Councillor Wong. Is there any discussion? No discussion. I'll put it. All those in favour? Against, declare that carried. Councillor Elmore, I believe you wish to speak.
The minutes of the extraordinary meeting.
We haven't got there yet.
Yeah, no.
I'll just.
I thought it was next on the agenda.
Yeah, it is. But I just wanted to tidy up these facts. So, Mr. McNulty, and this is to go with the declarations of interest.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I need to declare an interest in the mayoral minute you're about to discuss for later in the meeting on the recruitment process for the General Manager. As this matter affects my contract of employment, I have a pecuniary interest.
Thank you, Mr. McNulty. I'll go first to the confirmation of the minutes of the ordinary council meeting of the... Moved Councillor Garrard, seconded Councillor Addy. Is there any discussion? No discussion. I'll put it. All those in favour? Against, declare it carried. I'll now move to the extraordinary council meeting held on the 27th of February. Councillor Elmore.
I have a question, Mr. Mayor. I wasn't here. I had planned a holiday and I wasn't expecting that meeting to take place. But anyway, I was reading the minutes and I read that you second apology for you moved an apology that Councillor Garrard wasn't here and and the Deputy Mayor seconded that. I think that would be an error. I don't think you would have moved that Councillor Garrard would have applied for.
I concur with that. Thank you.
You asked if we would accept that, and I moved that it be accepted, and if I remember correctly, it was Councillor Zeta that seconded that motion.
Do you concur, Councillor Zeta? Okay. If we could have, with that amendment, can I have a motion?
Move that way, Mr. Mayor.
Move Councillor Sarkis.
Seconded.
Seconded Councillor Elmore. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Declare that carried. We have 3 mayoral minutes on tonight. The first 2 being a request for sponsorship by Hay Rodeo Club, the second being a request for sponsorship for the 2018 Cumberland Local Business Awards, and the third being regarding a panel for the selection of the mayor, selection of the general manager. So I intend to hold the last mayoral minute to close council at the end of the council meeting. I do have a speaker for the first mayoral minute, so I would ask Miss Gillian Kirby to come to the mic and please address council. You'll have 3 minutes, Miss Kirby, and if you could remain there for any questions. Thank you.
Yes, I'm speaking about the request for sponsorship for the Hay Rodeo. And I know that only 2,000 is involved, and I know that some in the bush do it tough, just as do some residents of Cumberland. But if the proposed criteria for drawdown from the proposed mayoral fund and sponsorship policy require the expenditure to be of benefit to the Cumberland community, I have to ask my unanswered questions again. How does, for example, the purchase of 4 gift bags and free entry tickets help the ratepayers and residents of Cumberland? Surely 2,000 can be spent better locally, supporting local residents or projects in Cumberland. I understand the link with Hay came through a former Holroyd councillor. I'm not sure how long he lived there or if he was born there, but I gather that's where he's returned and again resides there. The latest correspondence yesterday from Mr McNulty states the former Holroyd Council approved the Hay expenditure on the basis that an alliance with Hay Council and its rodeo provided benefits to us residents and ratepayers. And I gather from his email that this expenditure could also be justified through a third avenue, a sister city policy, a third policy that also yet has to be developed and adopted by this council. In seeking feedback from residents regarding its draft community engagement policy, Council has referred us to the website of the International Association for Public Participation, and I see the core values and ethics of community engagement involve Council providing feedback, informing the community as to how and why Council decisions are made, and that the community should be able to influence decisions made. I emailed you all on Sunday, yet it still hasn't been explained how the proposed donation or sponsorship can be justified to us. And we have asked this very question of Holroyd Council before, yet it remained unanswered. I note the mayoral minute already flags the intention to provide the 2,000 to the Hay Rodeo through a 28-day exhibition. So this does seem another done deal and a waste of everybody's time putting this item on public exhibition for 28 days. But in the spirit of the draft community engagement policy and the International Association for Public Participation, can Council please advise how the Cumberland community benefits from any such decision and the $2,000 expenditure, as per the prudent outcome criteria detailed in the sponsorship policy, the mayoral fund, or the upcoming sister city policy, none of which exist as yet? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Kirby. Just my comments, having had some involvement with the previous Holroyd Council, we found that it was the exchange between the former Holroyd Council officers and the Hay officers of trying to understand the difficulties that each region take, and probably was a bit more one way than the other, e.g. The support that we were able to supply to our country cousins in Hay was very appreciated. And then through the alliance, they on several occasions visited our certain civic events so they could promote their city, which is a city, is a council of approximately 4,000 residents and would be the size of a small European country, and the difficulties that they face. So this gesture of $2,000 to promote one of their main tourist attractions in the coming year has been appropriate in the past. Likewise, we were also able to help them introduce an early childhood reading program through our Paint the Town Red. Our mascot is Poppy the Possum. They adopted a similar sort of mascot as being Paddy the Possum, and that actually won a state award, and it was my privilege to accept that award from the Lady Governor of New South Wales just prior to Holroyd being merged. There had been other issues where we were able to exchange apprentices so they could understand the difficulties of what the country people face, and especially how reliant country councils are on the federal government grants, where they couldn't even maintain their roads if those grants weren't forthcoming. And another example I can think of is when they required assistance because they hadn't held a citizenship in many a year, and they actually had to phone up the then my secretary, who was able to give them guidance because they had 3 new citizens that were going to take their oath. Funny enough, one of those new citizens ended up becoming a resident of South Wentworthville. So I can understand your concern, but I think, and I am on public record because I did appear before a parliamentary inquiry on the mergers of councils, and I was asked specifically about that, and I was stated publicly that if more metropolitan councils supported struggling rural councils, then we'd probably alleviate a lot of the problems that the bush councils have. So thank you for your question.
Well, I appreciate your explanation, and I guess you can perhaps see that people might have seen a conflict of interest with the connection of the former councillor and where he lived. I mean, it could have been any other location, but I appreciate your explanation.
Thank you. Council, I won't bother reading the full brief. I will go to the recommendation, but Councillor Lake, would you like before I read the recommendation?
Yeah, just another example that I could remember, Mr Mayor, was when I was on the Council's Youth Consultative Committee. I remember our youth forum. I remember some young people from this area went down to Hay and spent some time with some young people in Hay. Together they made a video, which I understood won a national competition. So there's another example where the relationship has been of benefit. I think the city and country thing has been great for to allow some sort of youth exchange.
Councillor Lake, Council, my recommendation is that Council publicly exhibit for a period of 28 days its intention to provide sponsorship of $2,000 to the Hay Rodeo Club Inc. for the 2018 Hay Twilight Rodeo. I've moved. I don't need a seconder, so I'll just call. Is there any discussion? No discussion. I'll put it. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. Councillor, the second mayoral minute regards a request for sponsorship of the 2018 Cumberland Local Business Awards. The Council has received a sponsorship proposal from Precedent for the 2018 Cumberland Local Awards to be delivered on Wednesday the 30th of May 2018 at the Wentworthville Leagues Club. The Cumberland Local Business Awards aim to reward local communities' best businesses. The awards give local businesses an opportunity to promote their business and its strength, display their range of products and services, and provide in-store displays of their local business awards success. The organisers of the Cumberland Local Business Award have proposed 2 sponsorship packages to Council for the 2018, and they include a platinum sponsorship of $25,000 plus GST and a major sponsorship of $18,000 plus GST. The coverage offered to the Council under each package is outlined in the relevant attachments, and in 2017 Cumberland Council sponsored Precedent to deliver the first Cumberland Local Business Awards. The former Auburn and Holroyd councils also provided sponsorship to previous business award programs delivered by Precedent in line with the former council areas. The Council is in the process of developing a formal sponsorship program, and at the Council meeting of the 7th of February 2018 resolved to place on public exhibition a draft sponsorship policy. Upon adoption, Council sponsorship policy and program will enable a more strategic approach for Council to manage future incoming and outgoing sponsorship requests. Council's Operational Plan 2017/18 Service Plan Number 1 identifies that Council will facilitate partnerships with businesses, not-for-profit and communities to deliver service programs and events. It is also important to note that Council has sufficient funding allocated in the corporate and civic events budget for 2017/18 to cover the cost of the 2018 Platinum Sponsor Package. Given that the proposal aligns with Council's strategic goal of a strong local economy, there is funding available in the 2017/18 budget. I propose that Council supports the Platinum Sponsorship Package proposal. So I recommend that Council provide sponsorship of $25,000 plus GST to Precedent for the Platinum Sponsorship Package for the 2018 Cumberland Local Business Awards. I don't need a second, but if you'd like to speak, if there's any speakers.
I'd like to speak. Much as I support local business, and I think it's a great thing that we have these local business awards. Precedent is a company, a profit-making company that goes out and does this in many local government areas. And I appreciate what they do. However, what they're asking in hindsight is for council to sponsor them for a particular fee, be it 25,000 or 18,000 or whatever the fee is. Then they go out and do what they do, which is great. Their certificates say that it's a Cumberland Council award. It's a Cumberland Council Local Business Award, yet we have to pay them 25,000 in order for them to give a Now, if we didn't sponsor them, really they don't have an award to give on behalf of council. So it's almost, to me, like they're double dipping. They're charging, or they're asking for sponsorship from council. Now, I appreciate if they get sponsorship from Stocklands, as they did last year, and from that shopping centre in Auburn, what's it called? Mega Mall, whatever it's called in Auburn. I'm not too familiar with that shopping centre yet. But that's all good and said, right? They get this funding from them. But why are they asking council to give them another 25,000 when it's us who give up our time to go there, present these awards? It's this council's logo that goes on the certificates to be presented to those local business owners. They're asking us, and then they ask you to pay to go to these awards. I don't know, I can't recall how much it is to go to the dinner so that you can receive the awards. But then they're asking for money again when you go there. I think you're just double dipping. Yeah, you get, the council does. The council does, but I'm talking about everybody. Like, they're using council to make their certificates legitimate, yet they still want a sponsorship from the council. And so I don't agree with that concept, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Sarkis. I have Councillor Elmore, then Councillor Garrard, then Councillor Grove. Councillor Elmore.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I certainly support local businesses because they employ a lot of local people, and there's a lot of young people around here that need jobs. So I certainly support your mayoral minute, but not being on Cumberland Council for very long, who actually is the Cumberland Local Business Awards? What are they a group of people? I just want to, can you please explain?
Ms Endicott.
You, Mr. Mayor, the Precedent Productions is the actual company that is the organiser. What they do is they perform, they work in with local councils and other sponsors across local government areas, so they align their business awards program with council areas and then seek sponsorship from the council and major businesses. So the Cumberland Local Business Awards itself isn't a company. That's the name of the program that they're operating and running. They will operate that whether or not council participates or not, but it's whether or not council wants to be a partner in that or a sponsor in that process. So the Cumberland Local Business Awards is the name of the program. Precedent Productions is the actual company. So
it's actually a production company
that's correct.
That holds these events in all different local government areas. And if this group wants to hold a local business awards in Cumberland, I think Cumberland Council should be part of it.
Councillor Elmore, Councillor Garrard.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Look, I'll support the mayoral minute. It should include an appropriate fund where this is coming from. I mentioned that at the last meeting, and we've got to get used to doing that because we've got the Code of Meeting Practice before us tonight, model code, and it's in there that you have to identify where money's being spent from.
It is. It's identified. We've got to fund
it does, Councillor Garrard. If you look on the back page, the second last paragraph.
Yes, but it's not in the recommendation.
Okay, I take your point. So I'll ask the officers if they could transfer or take a copy of that second last paragraph and put it below the recommendation.
Look, the other thing, I will support this reluctantly because I think it would be more meaningful if we had an up and running economic development department which was out there thumping the table, maximising opportunity with business and industry and commerce. I know we haven't got that. I know that we've planted a seed and we're beginning to nurture it. On that basis, I think it would be disheartening to move away now that this minute's public. But on the basis of that, I would see a lot more work to be done in the next 12 months around that position, so that when we have the same situation next year, we're actually doing it because we're kicking goals.
Thank you, Councillor Garrard. Councillor Grove.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I'll flag that I intend to vote in favour of the minute based on the current level of debate. I do just want to run a second layer of questions over the amendments to the Local Government Act and where we sit with respect to this. If we can just willy-nilly pull sponsorship ideas out of a budget, then why on earth do we need a policy at all? I know a policy might be a nice thing to have, but I thought the intention of the amendments to the Local Government Act were to make sure that this expenditure is in accordance with a policy, not prior to the introduction of a policy.
Mr. McNulty.
And yeah, I could ask the same question about hay, but yeah, I'm not going to fight over $2,000.
Mr. Mayor, the amendments to the Local Government Act, which Councillor Grove refers to, state that Council may, in accordance with the resolution of the Council, contribute money or otherwise grant financial assistance to persons for the purpose of exercising its functions. And it talks about 28 days public notice must be given. But however, public notice is not required if the financial assistance is part of a specific program, which this is. The program's details have been included in the draft operational plan for the year, which this has been. The program's proposed budget for that year does not exceed 5% of the council's proposed income, which this doesn't. And the program applies uniformly to all persons within the council area. So I think we've actually complying fully with the requirements of the amendments to the Act.
Sorry, could I just get the first three again?
Part of a specific program.
Okay, tick.
The program's details have been included in the council's draft operational plan for the year in which the financial assistance is proposed to be given. And the program's proposed budget for that year does not exceed 5% of the council's proposed income from ordinary rates levied for that year.
Okay. I'll flag that I think that second dot point is pretty shaky. I'm still supportive of the awards. I'm happy to back it this time, but I would flag that I don't think the writers of the amendment or the amendments to the Local Government Act would have wanted this event to occur tonight, lawful as it may be.
Thank you, Councillor Grove. Any further discussion? No further discussion. I'll put it. All those in favour? Aye. Against? Declare it carried. We have a public forum. Yes, but it'll be held over for closed session. This is regarding park committees. Could Mr. Graham Allen please come to the microphone? And I believe, Mr. Allen, this is as you were the secretary of the Ray Marshall Park Committee. You have 3 minutes to address council. I believe there has been a request for your questions to be put on the screen.
Only if that's possible, yeah, Mr. Mayor, and if possible before the officer starts the egg timer, I'd just like to also take this opportunity to welcome yourself and your fellow councillors to Cumberland Council as a foot trench digger for the old Parramatta Council ward that we're in, the Woodville ward, and we got divorced from there, and then we had a love match between Auburn and Holroyd, and we're glad to see that you have come together and amended your ways, and we formed the Cumberland Council, and I'm happy that the Woodville ward now is part of the Cumberland Council, and I look forward to working with you all and trying to work in the interest of the community and do the best for the constituents that you all represent. So welcome to the council for the past councillors and also for the new councillors. and to the staff as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. Could we just reset the clock? But before we do, Mr. Allen, obviously, and I think the councillors are aware of the questions that you've asked, and I believe they're very valid questions.
Thank you.
And probably it happened while the council was under administration, but to miss your former 355 committee was very onerous. But I also believe that you're going to have a meeting with the group manager on Friday for Parks and Recreation.
Correct.
I don't mean to impinge on your time.
No, you're not doing that, Mr. Mayor. And I thank you for taking the time to actually digest a bit of the
and the
format.
questions that you'll have put will be, there'll be a written response in the minutes of this meeting. So, but I'll now hand over to you for your 3 minutes. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And if I tend to, it's actually 3 minutes and 35 seconds, but I'll do my best. Okay, here we go. The topics on park committees, and my question one is this: is the present ratepayer elected council bound by all the decisions made by the previous government appointed administrator? If not bound by the decisions made by the previous administrator, can those decisions now be set aside and be reviewed and reassessed by the council and then appealed on behalf of the ratepayers it represents? And if so, how does that process occur? Question two: why were previously appointed and gazetted park committees sacked? Who sacked them, and what evidence or basis was used in supporting their sacking? Question three: will council advise me as to what consultation and communication process was undertaken or used in obtaining the evidence used in making the decision to sack all park committees, especially the Ray Marshall Reserve Park Committee, which worked effectively within the Woodville Ward of Parramatta City Council and its ratepayers for over 45 years? And as we have not been formally notified or spoken to, we are still operating as a committee to date. Question three: does Cumberland City Council intend to reinstate the park committee system? And if so, what processes and policies will or have they engaged to do so? And when will this occur? For example, has anybody from council contacted committee members from the park committees that were transferred over from the Parramatta Council, seeking their intentions to continue their committee or involvement with the park that they represented under Parramatta Council? And if so, how and when did this consultation occur? Question four, regarding releasing of the Ray Marshall Reserve for the 2018 season and beyond. Excuse me, I'll take a breath. Will Cumberland City Council defer any decisions in relation to the leasing or casual hiring of the Ray Marshall Reserve until such time that the Park Committee is formally reinstated and that the proper communication and consultation process takes place with the committee prior to any hiring or leasing taking place? And if not, why not? In closing, Mr. General Manager and councillors, if I may, I would like to briefly highlight question four. General Manager, I'm absolutely astounded and concerned that your council believes and accepts that the lack of consultation and communication regarding the transfer process of park committees and their members from Parramatta Council to Cumberland Council that was undertaken by your staff as being okay and acceptable. If this is the case, then I, along with other rate-paying residents, object to being locked out and not being involved or invited to be involved in a consultation process that one believed would already be a policy requirement of the Cumberland Council to follow. With respect, if Council Cumberland doesn't have an appropriate policy on public consultation and communication to follow, may I suggest and recommend that Cumberland simply use the Park Committee trim system that was used by Parramatta Council's Open Space Department and that was electronically transferred to Cumberland Council in April of 2017. This system worked very well for Parramatta Council, its park committees and especially the ratepayers. General Manager, it worked very well simply because Parramatta Council involved and allowed input from its ratepayers and park committees in its development and prior to implementing it as a policy of council. And as a result, I will state that their park committee management system and policies worked extremely well for both council and the community it represents. Thank you for your time, councillors, tonight, And I wish you all very well for the rest of your meeting and look forward to meeting each and every one of you over the coming meetings and months. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. And as I stated, there will be the questions will be answered. Is there any questions of Mr. Allen? Councillor Grove.
Mr. Allen, thanks for coming. I'm very curious about your question 4. And just in a pretty blunt and direct way, is there drama at the Ray Marshall Reserve? Is there conflict about the leasing or casual hiring of that reserve at the moment? Are there 2 interest groups vying for control of the ground?
Very interesting comments, Councillor Grove. The TRIM system that was in operation from Parramatta Council was a policy formulated through ratepayers and committees to assist council in how they can eradicate the very problems that you're now raising. And when the leasing and applications for casual hire came before council through their advertising in the local papers, what the council open space management department did was that they notified the park committees and asked for input. And on that park committee, there are delegates from the non-voting delegates from the local sporting club that leased the park and from members of the community. And because any end user application or usage also affects the community. So there is a combined communication process and consultation process that takes place. And then the park committee, after talking to the community representatives and the sporting representatives, then give a recommendation to that report from council. And then based on that report, they put it to council to vote on as far as who should use the field or not.
So are there sports user groups in conflict today over the use of the grounds at the reserve?
There is a, well, I don't know if I can comment on that because...
with a bunch of questions, I just want to know if there's a problem or whether we're trying to solve a problem that doesn't exist.
No, no. We're firstly, well, there's 2 issues that, and one, and I thought you might have listened to that particular issue. The leasing of the park goes before council after consultation with park committees. What council did in this particular case was eliminate Ray Marshall Reserve and its park committee from having any consultation in regarding the leasing and hiring of the park. And as a result of that, both the current end user, which is a long-term end user, and the park committee have only just recently been advised that there is another interested user that council appears to be supporting, which in turn, if that goes through, will cause conflict not only with the existing long-term user, but also the community at large.
Okay. Who are the users or potential users?
The potential...
So who's the incumbent user? Who's the current user or users that have been used?
Parramatta Rage.
Okay, and are we aware of, is there a proposal in for another user?
Mr. Govers.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm advised that there are 2 current groups that have applied for use through the winter EOI, excuse me, one being Granville Range and the other being FC Ghazi.
Sorry?
FC Ghazi.
Are they both soccer clubs? Okay, thank you.
Yeah, they're both soccer clubs. One's a junior development club and one's a Premier League, a New South Wales First Division team.
Thank you.
Okay.
I believe there's other questions, Mr. Allen, from
thank you.
Firstly Councillor Addy, then Councillor Garrard, then Councillor Sarkis. Councillor Addy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's not actually a question to Mr. Allen. Again, thank you for bringing the issue to hand. Someone correct me if I'm wrong through you, Mr. Mayor, but did we go back a few weeks ago that someone said that Parramatta Council did not have any 355 committees, or is this a totally separate committee or different type of committee that Parramatta Council ran for the reserves?
Govers.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, Council was not aware of the existence of the Ray Marshall Park Committee and the information transferred from Parramatta Council.
And if I may, I think there was a fair bit of information. I didn't know about park committees, but I do know in other areas.
They weren't the same as 355s.
They, well, obviously operated as a 355.
But I distinctly remember when we were going through the 355 committees that Councillor Elmore stated that they never had 355 committees back at Parramatta Council. Or was that not correct?
I believe, if I remember correctly, Councillor Addy, that they were some operating, but mightn't have been to that knowledge. Councillor Elmore, if you'd like.
There were some park committees operating, but I understand that some of them weren't very active. Some were. Well, I don't know, but
And then now the question to Mr. Allen. So you are aware of 355 committees, correct?
Correct.
So are you asking to reinstate a 355 based committee back at Ray Marshall Reserve?
Correct, because under the Parramatta system, we've been a park committee there for over 45 years, operating and gazetted by Parramatta Council and local government under the Act. And when the sackings took place, we were not formally notified. And then when the merger took place, somehow we were, after talking to your open space manager, somehow our park committee and park, the whole park, was somehow lost in the system or forgotten, because we only found out third hand that that your council, through the general manager and the mayor, was actually reinstating park committees. So we met very quickly with your manager, who brought some applications with her, and we applied to be on that committee. And she was actually astounded how our park committee was overlooked. So what we're trying to do in a way is correct the
issue the park committee was overlooked. I've done some research into what we call the former Parramatta Council assets. And I believe, in someone correct if I'm wrong again, I don't think we actually have a full list of what assets we've taken over from Parramatta Council. I think that's... I'm serious.
Yeah, okay. No, I'm not doubting it, because it was all electronically transferred in one big bundle in 2017.
And I think I spoke to the staff about this very matter last week. We still haven't received a list of what we actually own now that was actually formerly Parramatta's.
Look, with respect, I'm not trying to tell the general manager how to run his council, or you councils how to do your job. What we're doing from a very respected and long-serving park committee that has had this park built from 1958, a dust bowl and a landfill site, to a premier park to what it is now. We don't want to be forgotten, and we don't want to be lost.
We commend you on what the work,
and we don't want all the hard work just pushed aside. So we want to be reinstated. Sorry for talking. Yeah.
I think the council has undertaken a resolution that we are going to reinstate committees, not in the same way they used to run and operate. And the general manager can explain, unless you don't know about that just yet.
I don't know about anything what the Cumberland Council intends to do. I'm sorry.
What's going forward, and et cetera, et cetera.
Be nice to know. Yeah.
The council resolved some months ago, I think, before Christmas, to reinstate or to seek expressions of interest for each of the parks that in the area about community interest in establishing park committees. The park committees would have different responsibilities to the 355 committees that used to operate within the former Holroyd Council. Auburn Council had none. We can certainly provide you all the details associated with that at the meeting you're going to have with Mr Burns on Friday.
Okay. Is that all, Councillor Addy?
Not forgotten.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Garrard, then Councillor Sarkis, then Councillor Elmore, then Councillor Christou. Councillor Garrard.
Mr Mayor, I can smell a rat the moment Mr Allen gets to the microphone, because he's been around so long and he doesn't get out of bed. I know he's been a very sick man in recent times, and he doesn't get out of bed to come to council meetings without this being a real problem, potential problem. What's been mentioned tonight, Mr Allen, is that, and what I've heard from the council officer then, is that there's a higher level soccer competition going to take place, or could take place there, as against the locals that use the field.
Yeah, that's correct, Councillor Garrard.
It might be worth appreciating a comment around the unique balance that exists at the moment between sporting recreation groups and the neighbourhood.
Yeah, thank you for that, Councillor Garrett. It's very important that council, as the general manager and the mayor indicates, we've got like half a council that is not familiar with the park committee system, and then another half of the council has had all their park committees sacked, and unfortunately we've been in the middle and done nothing wrong. So what council needs to now quickly be advised of is that Parramatta Council was very selective and has been very selective in the usage on a lot of their reserves because of the expenditure and the cost of the upkeep for those reserves. And our reserve in particular was selected after consultation with the community and council and the park committee for partly passive recreation, bush regeneration, protection of the ecosystem of the Duck River, for which I was a member of the Duck River Steering Club committee, and also for junior development in sport. And that sport, after trying many sports on that field, from gridiron down to rugby league, to touch football, softball, the whole lot, the community decided the only sport that they would support there, because of its location within the community and the Fast Wellington Road, was junior sport, soccer. So for many, many years, for decades, all that's been played there is junior soccer. And what we cater for there is all nationalities. We pride ourselves in talking to the police and the community worker there, welfare officers with the police force, and the corrective services with the prisons, and having working bees there, and also engaging the youth unemployment into social teams there. So it's not all competition, a lot of it's a social aspect. Then there's the junior development, then there's the competitive side of it. So it's very complex, and it's been very, very successfully run under our leadership and council's support for many, many decades. And what we have now is that, I suppose, with our council being aware of all of this, there is a conflict, in answer to Councillor Grove's comments, and that conflict is this, that without any consultation, and without council being aware of what we've just spoken about, there's two applications. One is for the existing user, which is what I've just mentioned, and one is for a very, very competitive New South Wales Premier League First Division side, and I think in its reserve team. Now, what that means is there's I don't like using the word competitive, but there's conflict now in the ground usage, the ground times. Now, when you've got 7 and 8 and 10-year-olds playing soccer and trying to learn how to play, you've got half a field each. Then right beside you've got an all-age First Division New South Wales side, powering the ball along. We've been down this path before. It's bound to fail because of injuries, and the coaches pull the little kids away and things like that, and it just doesn't work. And what we're asking council to do is to just defer the matter until they can properly hear all the facts, be aware of what the community's concerns are through the park committee, and what the park committee's concerns are and the existing end users' concerns are before they make a call on it. And as I said, we've been down that path before. Councillor Garrett, as our patron, and the Woodville Ward councillor, has been down this path, a long, well-worn track with the community and many clubs, okay? So all we're saying is that it doesn't work, having all-age senior teams clashing with the little kids playing their footy, all right?
I'm just mindful that there's a maximum of 30 minutes on a public forum.
I apologise.
Having said that, are you comfortable, Mr. Allen, standing?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. It's a very important issue, and I would like to...
And I take your point, and those issues that you've raised, I'd like to think a lot of those will be answered with your meeting with the group manager on Friday. But Councillor Garrard, you...
Well, Mr. Mayor, I've sat here for 5 months and had to listen to Holroyd issues, so you can listen to it tonight as need be, associated with this park committee. Because undoubtedly it's the most successful park committee that I've seen operate in the area. Look, That uniqueness that you've spoken about is important, Mr Mayor, and I'd like the councillors, the council officers to take that on board. But I don't know this soccer club that's coming over from the East Bank to the West Bank, and who are the FC?
I just wouldn't mind if Mr Allen would like to take a seat. I'm just concerned for you.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, yeah.
He's always getting a sympathy vote.
Don't feel intimidated, Mr Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't know this club, FC Garden. Garbage. FC, how do you spell it?
Gazi. G-A-Z-I.
Oh, Gazi, okay. Okay. There wouldn't be anybody employed in this organisation in the health and recreation, sport and recreation that is in the club, would there?
Mr McNulty.
Mr Mayor, I've heard this allegation before, and I've checked it today, and there is no one employed in the Parks and Recreation Service who has a relationship with FC Gazi. Right, this will need to know.
Is that all? Well, I have Councillor, if Councillor Garrard is finished, I have Councillor Sarkis, then Councillor Elmore, then Councillor Christo. Councillor Sarkis.
Mr Mayor, seeing is that Mr Allen's seated, I'll stay seated for my questions. First of all, Mr Allen, thanks for coming out here today. The question I have is Parramatta Gaze is now Cumberland Gaze, correct? Parramatta Gaze? Sorry, Rage, sorry.
Granville Rage.
It's Granville Rage?
Yes, Granville Rage.
Okay, well, whilst you're up there, you said Parramatta.
Yeah, I think they've got two sections. Yeah.
So it's Granville Rage?
Yeah, the juniors.
And how long have they been there at Ray Marshall Reserve?
Approximately 8 years, I think now.
8 years?
I think 8 years.
And this FC Gazi, do they currently play or have they been at Ray Marshall Reserve as well, or is this a new...
Mr Govers.
Through you, Mr Mayor, they were using the facility last year.
Right, so they've only used it for 1 year?
Mr Mayor, that's correct.
So they're both incumbents, one of 8 years and one of 1 year?
Through you, Mr Mayor, I understand that Granville Rage used the facility from 2010 to 2016.
Okay, so you're saying that in the last 2 years Granville Rage hasn't used the park?
It's my understanding, Mr Mayor, that they weren't an incumbent last year.
Is that correct, Mr Allen, according to your knowledge?
Not to my knowledge, that is, and the manner in which Gazi used the field was as assistance to the Gazi club, because they didn't have a club and it was on a temporary basis to assist them, more of a unilateral sort of assistance where you're soon to be helping your neighbour. And but after doing some history and some checks on the club, and especially this particular mob, we found that other councils had problems with them. They've owed money to two associations where they can't be registered with, and they owed money to Fairfield Council and a number of other councils. And when that was brought to my attention that the two connected with that, then we're very concerned on behalf of Cumberland, who are...
Yeah, Mr Allen, thank you for that answer.
But they did just share the field.
Sure. So, in short, you're not sure if Granville Rage actually used it in the last year?
Well, I'm pretty sure they did.
Okay. So, what we have then is two potential soccer clubs that used the field last year. One was Granville Rage, an incumbent for 8 years, and one is FC Gazi, who moved over, as I understand it through discussions today, moved over from Auburn, because they had a falling out with the field rep where they were there, which was, well, we're not going to mention any names, but they had a falling out with the, if you like, the people that took care of the sporting field that they were on in Auburn. So they've migrated, if you like, over to the Ray Marshall
Yeah,
Reserve.
that's when Rage helped them out and provided a ground for them. Yep.
Right, okay. The only other thing I'd want to bring up is with your questions, you went through 4 questions. In fact, if we just light up on those questions, there's actually 5 questions because you've highlighted number 3 twice. So there's 2 question 3s right there. There's one that says, does Cumberland City Council intend to reinstate? And there's the one above it which says, will council advise me as to what consultation? So,
My apologies.
no, that's okay, but when you refer to question 4, I assume you were talking about the second question 3.
No, I was referring to question 5. You're correct, Councillor.
Okay, so you were referring to question 5.
Yeah, my apologies.
No, that's okay. It's we're all human. We make these mistakes. Look, you've shed some light to me as to where they stand and who's been where and who's been at the park for a long time. It's your committee that represented that park, and I guess you guys allowed FC Ghazi onto that park. But I have a question to the general manager and his officers. I also read somewhere along the line that some upgrades were made to that park, or some alterations were made to suit the state division of a particular team. Now, I'm not sure whether that team was, from the talk that we've had tonight, I'm assuming that it was FC Ghazi, where we've had a metre extension and they're seeking some fencing. Is that something that has come to light as a result of one of these teams being there?
Mr. Govers.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. There hasn't been any upgrades to the facility as yet.
Right.
That will be dependent upon a decision made through the winter EOI process.
Right.
Discussions with Football New South Wales, I believe, is the correct title of the organisation. There will need to be alterations made to one of the fields so it will fit the standard required. And for the level of the competition that FC Ghazi play in, there will need to be fencing around the field according with all New South Wales requirements. But council can, I've been advised, get a dispensation for up to 12 months to do those.
But it will have to be done in the long run.
To do.
Okay. So that puts things into perspective. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Mr. Allen.
Thank you.
Councillor Elmore, then Councillor Christou, then Councillor Rami. Councillor Elmore.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to get this get this debate back on track. Originally, we were talking about the re-establishment of the park committee, not an argument about the Granville Rage and FC Ghazi. He was going to play on it. I think that debate we're getting into is irrelevant about the park committee. But I understand that the new Cumberland Council put back the park committees that were abolished by the administrator. I understand that Ray Marshall Reserve was advertised. The park committee established the Ray Marshall Reserve, as many other park committees, and I told everybody that I knew about these park committees, and I don't think, to the best of my knowledge, I don't think the Ray Marshall Reserve Park Committee, I don't think they actually seen the advertisement, but I understand they haven't informed or didn't apply to form a committee. Is that right?
Mr. Govers.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm not able to answer that as to whether we've got any applications from Ray Marshall, former park committee, but certainly the officers have advised me that they are willing to take any member of the community who are interested in the management of local parks.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, if I'm able to just briefly comment on that
Mr. Allen.
Ludicrous statement made by Councillor Elmore. I actually take offence at what Councillor Elmore just said. We're a serving committee. They have not been either notified by phone, email, or any form of correspondence that we were sacked. We are a long-serving committee since 1968 on Parramatta Council. All the information, which includes contact names, numbers and positions, were transferred over to Cumberland Council. Now, I'm not sure whether it went to Maryland's or Holroyd section of that, Mr. Mayor, and Mr. General Manager, but I've been informed that all that information was sent over under the TRIM system electronically in April of 2017. Now, with respect to Councillor Elmore, I take offence because we don't get the Auburn Review or the newspaper from over here. We don't even get the Parramatta Advertiser. But one would have thought, being a local government gazetted committee, that we would have been respected enough by Cumberland Council to be notified that the decisions made by the administrator were now going to be overturned and that the park committee system was going to be reinstated. And we would have thought, as councillors over on this side have said, that existing end users should have some sort of priority. Well, I would have thought 45 years services on the one park committee, you would have been given priority and been formally notified over the actions of the previous administrator, and it was going to be reversed and had some courtesy shown.
No, I take.
So sorry, excuse me, Mr. Mayor, and Mr. General Manager, but to now to try and palm this off that we should have read the paper and that's good enough to take up.
No, Mr. Allen, I don't mean to.
I
believe Mr. Councillor Elmore wasn't referring to the contact yourself, and as I stated at the start, it was an oversight. The information wasn't passed on as far. Obviously, there's other people who knew the information, but I'm mindful of the time. I don't mean to cut the debate off,
that's okay.
but we have gone past the 30 minutes.
I'd like to highlight just one thing, Mr. Mayor.
Well, look.
Mr. Mayor, is that a second? Yeah, I'll second that. Is that a second?
Move Councillor Christou, seconded Councillor Sarkis. Look, I'll take it, but we need to wrap it up because I'm mindful of getting through the meeting. That's the whole point. And I'm sure that Mr. Allen's concerns and answers will be given by the appropriate officer. Now, we can keep firing the questions, but unfortunately, I'm concerned for Mr. Allen's health.
I'm fine, Mr.
That's
Mayor,
fine.
and
I don't believe they should be directed at him.
No, they're not.
So I'll go in order.
I'm able to answer them.
I accidentally pressed mine and so I had to press it again.
Okay, well, I've got Councillor Elmore, if you'd like to finish up. Then I've got...
I'll finish.
You're finished? Councillor Christou?
I didn't ask any questions.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Christou, maybe of assistance. Code of meeting practice, I believe, allows people to ask questions but not make statements towards the person. That may help get this a little bit further across.
Correct. Councillor Christou.
Mr. Mayor, through you to Mr. Allen. Mr. Allen, can you tell me how many people sat on this committee, on the Ray Marshall Committee?
Yeah, it fluctuated from 18 down to about, well, I think we're down to about six to eight people. But it varies from time to time.
Okay, so when you had your meeting, what was the average turn-up?
The average turn-up, well, we had to have a quorum, so it was half plus one of whatever the registered amount of people there was. But on average, there would have been 5 to 6, maybe 8 people.
Of those 8 people that attended regularly, were those people affiliated or life members of any club?
The constitution and the meeting practice that we operated under invited no more than 2 members of the sporting club to be on our committee, of which only one had a voting right on our committee.
So what I'm asking is, what was the makeup?
No, there was no members from life members from the sporting clubs.
Okay, or any that sat on committees? Any that sat on committees of those clubs?
We had, as I said, we had committee members, because I mentioned before, in order to know the requirements of what the sporting clubs needed, we need to talk to the sporting clubs. So we sought to have members of their committee on our committee, but they could not vote.
Are you able to give me a breakdown of which clubs or which representatives from which clubs were on that committee?
Well, it was whoever had the lease on the club, so it would go down from Granville Raj to Melita Eagles, down to Parramatta, Granville RSL. We go way back, mate. How far you want to go back?
Look, I've been on record, okay, so I'll say it again. When the park committees were debated in council, I had concerns for this very, and I think I'm proven right tonight, for this very specific issue.
Which is?
Well, there seems to be a conflict between 1 or 2 rival clubs that are bidding for the field. Now, I think...
That's not correct.
Look, I think I'm going to pass over to Councillor Rami, and because he was the next in line, I'm going to cut it there. I'm sorry, but we've spent enough time on this. Councillor Rami, please be brief.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, Mayor, to Mr. Allen. Correct me if I'm wrong, Granville Rage, they used to play out of Garside Park?
Yes, that's correct.
They still do, or they used to?
No, I think there was two sides. So there was a senior department side of their club, and we facilitate their junior club.
Okay, and
so their junior compartments are Granville Rage.
I mean, I've come through the ranks many years ago when I was a lot younger.
Yeah.
But Granville Rage and that whole area is basically the new name for what they used to refer to as Granville Youth League.
No. I wouldn't be
Garside Park as well.
I wouldn't be 100% sure, but
Athol Barnes, yeah.
Granville Youth, I think, was registered with the association as their youth team, and the junior component of that was the Rage, and we took them on. We're only ever before the juniors.
Correct. Which were I'm nearly done. Which were fed by the likes of Parramatta, Melita, Granville RSL.
A lot of feeder clubs. Yep.
And coincidentally, Granville Melita had the rights to Ray Marshall.
That's correct.
For a period of time.
That's correct.
My point is, there's a lineage and a history of Granville Rage, Granville Youth, Parramatta Melita, going back to Granville RSL, using Ray Marshall.
That's correct.
Now we've got this FC Ghazi who have a history of pissing parks off that just want to put their hand on it and utilise it.
Correct.
Okay.
Thank you. That'll close the public forum. Thank you, Mr. Allen. And
thank you, Mr. Mayor, for taking the time to hear me. And
someone let Mr. Allen out of the. Thank you.
To you and to your department. I recall when this Parks Committee was voted on by this council, I think it was Councillor Lake that brought it up. Councillor Lake specifically said that every existing Park Committee that was should be contacted. And so the question I would have of this council is, why wasn't this Park Committee contacted? It was. I remember it being a specific part of her motion that all existing Park Committees be contacted and informed that they were going to advertising. Is that not correct, Councillor Lake?
Well, I believe the officers didn't know that Park Committee existed. And as was stated earlier on, there was a lot of information that the former Parramatta Council never passed on to the new Council of Cumberland.
In tackling this, Mr. Mayor, could I ask that Council investigate any other parks under the Woodville ward that may have been missed as well and contact them as well?
I'm sure there will be, but we do have two councillors that have had served years on the former Woodville ward, who I'm sure can bring the light to the appropriate officers. Those park committees, if they do or don't.
Nobody rings me up.
Well, I think, Mr. Mayor, that some emails need to be sent out and questions need to be asked.
Nothing.
Thank you very much.
Wales Government for introducing IHAP so that our resources are free to attend to this in the detailed manner that we have.
And on that note, it was my pleasure to attend two functions on the weekend, and I'd just like to state publicly to congratulate to the Hindu Council of Australia with the cooperation and a magnificent effort by the staff for holding a festival of colours, a holy festival at Civic Park on Saturday. I was able to attend from roughly midday to 3 o'clock. There would have been, while I was there, at least 2,000 people attended, and considering that this was arranged within 4 weeks, was a magnificent effort. I did, and so did many others. My fellow councillors, Councillor Saha and Councillor Lake, copped it. I'm sure it'll be on Facebook, Councillor Addy. Also, the SCS was successful in recruiting new volunteers that put up there. I think they got at least 3 while I was there, signed up. And on the Sunday, I was also able to attend the open day at Auburn SES, who had the fire brigade and police in attendance, They proceeded to demonstrate how to peel open a car like a can opener to carry out rescues, and I believe they were also successful in recruiting. So I intend to send out letters of congratulations to the appropriate organisation. Thank you, Councillor Grove. Moving on, Council, we're about to go in for items of exception. Would Council like to identify the items they wish to discuss? Oh, and I will mark that the first item has been withdrawn by the Acting General Manager. The tender evaluation report on cleaning of council buildings and facilities. So I'll go to the second item, the draft papers for model code of meeting practice. Councillor Lake. The renewal and establishment of alcohol. Councillor. Yep. The asbestos policy. The roads named at the new streets off Bootu Wargun Drive? No, thank you. The Cumberland traffic minutes meeting held on the 7th of February? If you identify the item, and then I'll... Okay, well, we'll go to that one, and when we get to that one, if you can identify, and then I propose to move the rest by omnibus. And obviously we need, we have Councillor Zareka on the last item. So with that, I'll move, do I have a motion that the Council of the item CO3/18-32, the names, is there a mover for that? Move Councillor Garrard, seconded Councillor Saha. Is there any discussion? No discussion. I'll put it. All those in favour? Against? Declare it carried. Councillor Lake, CO3/18-29.
Yeah, thanks, Mr Mayor. Councillors will recall just before Christmas, at length we went through the code of meeting practice that had been delivered to us by the administrator, and we did extensive work. Councillor Atty made quite a number of amendments, and between himself and myself, I think we managed to tease out a whole lot of changes. And then on the 20th of December, the last meeting just before Christmas, we got our code of meeting practice adopted, and that's the code of meeting practice we're working under at the moment. Subsequently, however, the Department of Local Government, in their wisdom, has decided that they're going to put out a model code of meeting practice, that they're going to make some of the clauses in it mandatory, which means we will have to amend our code of meeting practice to reflect those clauses. They've also offered a number of non-mandatory clauses, which we may or may not choose to have in our code of meeting practice. At the moment, it's a consultation draft, and they've put it out for submission, and it's come out to all of us. And I know our officers very dutifully some weeks ago emailed us all and asked us if we had anything we wanted to say. As is the case with councillors, we now at the very last minute have put a submission together, and I apologise to the officers for only just bringing these points to their attention. But if we're going to put in a submission on this draft model, then I think it's important that these particular clauses be considered tonight. So very briefly, I've done a table, it's up there on the screen. And I must say, in reading this consultation draft, it impressed me that the Office of Local Government was, it seemed to me, trying to reflect a meeting that would concern itself with getting on with the business of council, but perhaps not being as open to the sort of discussion that we've just been able to have with Mr Allen. So perhaps a much more business-like council meeting that that predetermines its agenda in advance. and I have some concerns about that. So if I just quickly go through these particular clauses that are being suggested by the Office of Local Government and my suggested submission in response. So turning to the first clause, 314B, it's a non-mandatory clause. The effect of it is that the General Manager will be given the power to defer the consideration of a notice of motion that in his view has legal, strategic, financial or policy implications. That's very broad. And in my submission, we shouldn't be supporting that sort of power to our General Manager. In my view, the decision to defer a notice of motion should be a matter for the Council, and it's certainly very much a matter of debate whether something has such implications as it's required to be deferred rather than discussed at a meeting. The second clause, 315, a non-mandatory clause, they're suggesting that a clause be put in that any notice of motion that has funding implications must identify a funding source. So that's a requirement, and if it doesn't identify a funding source, then the General Manager again will have power to defer that notice of motion. Again, I'm saying that shouldn't be supported.
Mr. Raddy.
I don't like cutting Councillor Lake short all the time, just sometimes. However, I mean, we're now starting to go through a motion that is actually not even a motion at this stage. So is Councillor Lake actually going to move this as an amendment to the actual...
I take it to try and expedite
exactly
and the meeting.
We've gone through this anyway prior to...
We have the draft. I don't think the councillors need a blow-by-blow explanation. Council, you are obviously putting forward these amendments to go.
I'll move the submission as the recommendation, as recommendation 1. And I'll move recommendation 2 just to keep it all together.
Just so I'm clear, so this is attachment 1 and you're adding your table 2.
What's there?
As adjustments to
table.
Which is not a problem. So I don't. I know I've got it electronically. I just wanted to confirm.
Well, before I continue, we mightn't get a second. So, seconded, Councillor Wong.
Okay.
Continue, Councillor Gray.
So just with respect to, and I'm referring to attachment 1, if that helps, Councillor Lake. 10.9, you would be not supportive of 10.9 because I'm certainly not supportive of giving the General Manager, no disrespect to the current office holder, the opportunity to, or the requirement that he second-guess council by way of report. Yeah. And
it's
so
not
you would
supported.
do a straight oppose or non-mandatory?
Yes. It's non-mandatory, but I'm saying that we should not support it.
I would see non-mandatory still implies best practice. I'm not even going to suggest that's best practice. I'm just flat opposed to it. So 13.1 to 13.7, new non-mandatory section. Yeah, okay, so that one's not on your list. We'd be silent on that one?
We're silent because I support it.
Not a problem. And you'd be supporting it as mandatory or non-mandatory?
I support it as mandatory.
Mandatory section. Okay. Okay, so I will flag in fact, I would probably move an amendment on this basis that and it would seek Councillor Lake's motion in order to delete, and if I have the assistance of Councillor Zeta, the position on item 3.15, notice of motion with funding implications must identify a funding source. Councillor Lake has flagged her opposition to that. I would flag my support for that and as a mandatory item. But I'm quite happy to just delete the item and leave that to the New South Wales government. There was something else I shot to Councillor Lake by way of reply email this afternoon.
1513, I think.
1513. What chairperson's authorised? Yes, I would also flag, and I'm open to hearing the feedback of councillors before I move an amendment in that space. That I would actually support the discretion of the chair to expel rowdy councillors. And I didn't have to deal with rowdy councillors in my term. Well, I must have dealt with them very well because I never felt the urge to expel a councillor. Well, I've done that on a mayoral vote night before. That would have actually got me a second term. Look, I'm fairly relaxed, considering the New South Wales government's early intervention powers, that sort of process would not be abused. I'd flag that's an opinion, but I would certainly
I'd just like to get a second for your amendment.
My amendment being the first one on the budget funding source?
Yeah.
Yes.
So item 3.15, and then I believe you've got item 15.13.
I will hold 15.13. I'll listen to the chamber for their thoughts first.
Okay, so it's just the one item for now. Is there a second for your amendment, Councillor Zeta?
And if I can just quickly speak to that, Mr. Mayor?
If you can, because you've had quite a speech today.
Mr. Mayor,
Ross, do we know what he's changing? I mean, I can't see it on the board.
I'll cover that. Councillor Lake is proposing that a notice of motion not be required to have a funding source attached to it. That councillors not be, when lodging a notice of motion, required to identify a funding source. This would not, New South Wales Government's proposal would not prohibit a councillor from seeking a report that could have staff explore funding sources if the councillor was not confident in identifying a funding source beforehand. What I don't support is the practice in some councils of coming to the floor with no funding source and opening the ratepayers' chequebook and then hoping all will be all right come budget time. I think, and look, to be quite frank, if councillors want to do that, I would prefer that councillors spell that out in their resolution as the funding source being the quarterly budget review. If you've got a trip hazard you want to move a notice of motion about, I would expect councillors, if they want to do that, to have the wherewithal and the knowledge of their organisation to identify that it would come from the risk management budget or from the engineering services budget. If councillors are not confident with doing that, they should not feel confident about opening the ratepayers' chequebook. There's been a discussion recently, it's been quite hot, around councillors focusing on strategic priorities, and with the local government mergers, this is now a $200 million plus government agency. I think this is a skill set councillors need to have. We can't go down the amateur path of let's just go buy a swing set. We need to say we need to buy a swing set, and that swing set needs to be funded from the council's parks and improvement program, or it needs to come from the mayoral allowance or wherever it's coming from. We should have the knowledge of this organisation to be able to deal with that, and if we don't, we shouldn't be moving notices of motion unless we're going to go down the path of asking for a report and having the general manager clean up our dirty housework after the fact. I think that's just a basic minimum expectation we should be setting upon ourselves. It's a big agency. It's a big role. We're being remunerated at a higher rate, and I think that's where we need to be in the future.
Thank you, Councillor Grove. Councillor Addy?
Mr Mayor, if I may, and I did this last time and I'll do it again. Councillor Grove accepts. I'd like to add to his amendment, and I'll actually go through every single item and not give you a full explanation, but we'll be here forever. However, item number 3.14b, we have two columns. One says effective clause and one says submission. What I'd like to move the amendment is leave Councillor Grove's one on there because that's exactly what I wanted anyway. So 10.9, leave it as it is, but let's go from the top. 3.14b, instead of it saying General Manager may defer, it says the Mayor, after consultation with the General Manager, may defer, etc., etc. The submission section, not accepted.
No, that's not what 314B says.
That's not what's in the draft submission.
I understand that, but that's going to be my submission.
But that's not the effect of the clause.
Well, in other words, the effective clause will become the submission instead of not supported. And then take that back to how it was.
Sorry, if I can just clarify, Mr Mayor, the column labelled effective clause is just a short description of the draft code of meeting practice.
That's fine. On that? The submission section, yep. 3.15, leave as is. I agree with what Councillor, not entirely what Councillor Grove said, but I mean, I understand where he's coming from, and yes, we need to understand what we do in this organisation. 4.1, so in other words, what the effect of the clause is remains as it is. There's no submission on that. 4.1 to 4.23. This is, I mean, Council just stated quite categorically at the moment that we just took 47 minutes to listen to one person give us 5 questions, which it ended up being what I call, and I said it in the meeting before this, you know, a Dutch auction down at the fish markets. I mean, it is getting out of hand. Whether you like it or you don't like it, we have to be a professional organisation. We have procedures and policies, and we don't have a forum that we start firing questions which become statements, which become arguments, which become whatever you want to call it. I am not a fan of public forum where it's just open slate that we don't know what the hell's going on. I'm a fan of everyone that wants to come and speak at a meeting, comes in, give us prior notice, tell us what you want to, what your questions are, come in, speak your questions, and then the staff are already prepared to answer those questions, and the resident, the community member, takes the answers away and is happy. To put them onto putting us on notice for argument, well actually not even putting us on notice, they're here with questions, sometimes we can't answer it, we end up spending an hour on one person, and by the way, it was supposed to be 3 minutes per person, which technically ends up being 10 people can speak. We had one person for 47 minutes, which is wrong. If they give us notice, it'll be in the actual business paper, on record. People are worried about not being on record, and of course it comes back. So my submission to that would be that we don't have a public forum at all. We have something in the form where people can ask questions with notice, the public, and they ask the questions prior to a certain date that the staff are capable to actually get an answer and put back into the actual meeting itself. Item 5.13, it says the Mayor in consultation with the General Manager may cancel. I agree with Councillor Lake, so her submission remains because technically speaking, unless the Mayor's got a crystal ball, we won't know whether there's going to be a quorum or not. You just have to wait. Item 7.1 to 7.2, leave it as it is, and we spoke about this prior to this. I think every person's office has a form of respect. I mean, you all heard Mr. Allen when he was here refer to the Mayor as Mr. Mayor. If it was a female, of course, he'd say Mrs. or Madam or etc. So it's just a form of respect. I mean, when you speak, I don't know how I can say to the Mayor, well, excuse me, Mayor, it's excuse me, Mr. Mayor. Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's not Mayor. It doesn't sound right. It sounds like a horse, actually.
They're going to call us Mr. Councillor.
No, we're called councillors. Our title is councillor. With regards to 8.2, order of business, if there's no forum, then order of business remains as it is. 10.9, motions requiring the expenditure, etc., remain as it is, which is what exactly Councillor Grove had, so that's why I tried to add to it. With respect of 11.10, I don't have an issue with the procedural motion, so I accept Councillor Lake's submission. 14.11, the public can, object to an item of public agenda being considered in closed session by submitting a written form, and the response is not supported, too onerous. No, actually, I support that. I mean, if there's an issue at closed session, and by the way, most of our closed sessions are at night, and with great respect to the gallery, most of the gallery is not here after our closed sessions anyway when we reopen up again. They should have something in writing. I mean, if there's an issue with it, put it in writing. I mean, for them to actually know there's a matter in closed session, then they've either read the documents prior, downloaded it somewhere, so there's no issue in getting a very basic form saying we object and just send it through to council. So I'll leave it as it is. 15.13, the chairperson authorised to expel any person on the ground as Councillor Grove stated. I accept that. I do not support a decision to expel a councillor should be a resolution of the council. I mean, let's be honest about this. If one of the Liberal guys is saying something, and of course his colleagues are going to support him. If one of the Labor guys are going to say something, of course their colleagues are going to support them. So I think it's a matter, and that is what the chairperson is there for. He's there to run the meeting and take care of what needs to be required. So I suggest that we leave it as it is and not support Councillor Lake's submission. And then set the time for the conclusion of the meeting. Look, I don't have an issue with what Councillor Lake has stated. However, it's not necessary. Because if you actually go through what it says, the meeting's set at 10 p.m. or what time we said. If it does go past 10 p.m., the mayor can actually extend it by 30 minutes or whatever it is. So it's actually not required. So that's what I'd like to put forward as the amendments. I know that in the past I did support the public forum. Well, I didn't actually support it, but I didn't understand much about it, which I stated back then. We've never had public forums before. I don't think Parramatta had public forums in the past, if I may. Yeah, exactly. So I don't want to get to a situation where we're just totally out of whack. It's bad enough as it is when we sit like last week, an hour and 40 minutes, and got nowhere with 3 separate motions that crossed the floor 3 times. To actually also allow the community come in, and we're not denying the community to speak, but put it structured. Let's have a policy in place and make it structured. We're prepared, they're prepared, they come in, they get their answers. I mean, poor Mr. Rowland couldn't even stand up for the duration he was here, and now he's gone home not knowing what is going on still at this stage, and we went for 47 minutes. So if he asks questions in advance, comes in the part of the business paper, it's open to everyone, so it's recorded and documented. The staff will have answers for them, even in writing if they have to, and they take the answers away and go home.
Mr. Mayor, is this a foreshadowed amendment?
I'm about to ask the mover of the amendment, do you accept those amendments, Councillor?
Was to give capacity to the mayor in conjunction with the general manager to defer a notice of motion. I think the capacity of councillors to move a notice of motion is a primal right for the council.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, just to explain that.
Clarification.
For clarification purposes, and I agree with what Councillor Grove has stated. However, I'm only referring to the fact that this a matter that is actually has legal, strategic, financial, policy implications. I'm not talking about general motions. If, for argument's sake, one of the councillors brings a motion to council that is actually an illegal motion, then why are we as councillors able to actually defer it or not if we don't know it's a legal motion? That's why it's referred back to...
I think the general manager now has capacity to just knock it on the head under the act.
That's all it's referred to, just to the fact that if it does have legal or strategic issues, not all motions, only those type of motions.
So do we have an understanding? Correct.
Why defer it if you can knock it on the head? I mean, it's just paperwork.
If we add the word
In
defer
fact,
or...
To that extent, I wouldn't actually support any reference to it. Because I don't like the idea of councillors coming before the council and saying, oh look, we will get to your item after the mayoral vote, after the general election, after my contract's renewed. Which I just think it's a dangerous precedent, and it creates a new relationship dynamic between mayor and general manager.
I'm going to ask, do we have a consensus between Councillor Addy?
What exactly are you trying to do? Does it not have it all?
I'm quite happy to be silent. if we can just bring up 3.14. No, I would support Councillor Lake's position on just a flat not supported.
No, she actually says the motion should be made for the council, not the general manager.
Correct. Yeah. So if the council wants to defer it, they need to defer it by resolution of the council.
But Mr. Mayor, through you, sorry, could Councillor Grove clarify? I'm not referring here to all motions. I'm only referring to motions that may be illegal, strategically, financial, or have policy implications that we need to get. Other motions don't.
I would support it as a primal right. If the general manager has enough power to knock motions on the head as is, I wouldn't want to extend his powers further.
Is that correct through you, Mr. Mayor, to the general manager?
Mr McNulty?
If a motion is deemed illegal, I can refuse it, yes.
And what if we don't have enough money for that motion, for argument's sake? Can you refuse it?
No.
Another issue.
But the current code, our council's current code of meeting practice actually requires that a motion that requires expenditure of funds nominate the source of the funds. That's in our current code of meeting.
Mr. Mayor, I don't have an issue in then changing that and removing it and keeping on the not supported section. So remove that.
Okay, so
just to try and get a consensus across the board and just have one motion forward.
So you accept everything else except
that's it. Yep. No, it's not. It's finished.
No, he's pulled into line. So Councillor, so you accept that?
Yes.
Councillor Zeta, you accept. Thank you. Council, further discussion.
Sorry, where are we at, Mr. Mayor?
You have an amendment. Well, you have the motion as per the table. Moved Councillor Lake, second Councillor Wong, and then you have the amendment moved Councillor Grove, seconded Councillor Zeta with acceptance of the changes that Councillor Addy has made. That's where we're at.
Can I just?
I appreciate that you asked.
Councillor Addy put forward, but did you ask the mover of the actual motion if she would accept those amendments herself?
I didn't feel that I would be wasting my breath, but I will if you like, Councillor Sarkis.
Normally,
Councillor Lake, would you like to accept those proposals by Councillor Addy?
You know me better than that.
Thank you, Councillor Lake. I think that answers the question.
I just think, Mr. Mayor, I think that the mover of the original motion should be asked first, but I'll run with that.
Further discussion? No further discussion. Right of reply, Councillor Lake.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I should say that what I've put forward in the original resolution is not just my view, but also a view that's shared on from the particular party of councillors that I'm here representing tonight. So this is a collection of views taken in a meeting of the Labor councillors. So I'm happy to put forward these views as the spokesperson of that group. If I just take them in turn, the concern about 314B, as I was saying earlier, it's all about who has decision-making authority, and the difficulty here, thank you, is that the general manager, he has the consideration. He gets to consider whether a motion has legal, strategic, financial or policy implications, and he then gets to make a decision as to whether or not the motion should be deferred. I don't think any elected body should be allowing an appointed person, even the esteemed general manager, to be taking into consideration the very broad nature of this clause. It gives him very unlimited power to control the agenda of council, and I think that would be a very wrong thing to support. The second one, the identification of a funding source. I agree that a motion that identifies a funding source is a much more persuasive motion, because it does show that the person who's put up the motion has thought about it carefully and done some research. However, I don't like the word must in these clauses. I don't like those sorts of absolutes. I think there are times where a motion could be put to the council that for consideration where the question can be asked in debate, where will we find the money? This is a problem and we have to sort this issue out. Where can the money come from? Surely that can be a discussion left to the council. Surely matters of urgency, where things have to be dealt with in a hurry, should be allowed a motion to come without identifying a budgetary source. It might be that the motion, the councillors will decide that the motion needs to be deferred, and again, that's their decision. In relation to public forum, look, we have Mr Allen here tonight. He didn't talk about anything that was on the agenda. He brought it to our attention, something that we knew nothing about and something that we needed to know about. And I think as a result, we will go away and make sure that these problems don't recur. We need public forum. We're not the vestiges of all knowledge in Cumberland. We're just learning about a whole lot of areas that we've had nothing to do with in the past. The purpose of the clause in the submission, in the recommendations from the local government department, is to say that public forum shouldn't be held in the council meeting. That's what it's saying. It's saying that the public forum should be taken right out of the council meeting and dealt with in a pre-meeting. Now, there would be real problems with that here. Lots of our councillors can't make it earlier than 6:30. Many turn up just as the meeting is started. You would not have the attention, the public forum participant would not have the attention of the whole council in a formal meeting process if that occurred. So I fought very hard to get public forum back in after the administrator took it out. Holroyd has always had it and dealt with it. There are rules. It's not about a free-for-all. It's not about a fish market, as Councillor Addy referred to it. It's a precise and important part of our council meeting, and it's about councillors listening. We don't always have to do the talking. 513 there seems to be no problem there. The next one, 7.1 to 7.2, should we be addressed as Mr Mayor or Madam Mayor? Look, the only person who calls me Madam is my mother, and that's usually when I'm in trouble. I'm not the Mayor, but if I was, I don't think I'd want to be Madam Mayor. And I would not find it at all disrespectful to be called Mayor, because that's what the legislative title is. You are the Mayor, or you are the chairperson. And gender-based titles are really, really old-fashioned. So, you know, you're an old-fashioned lot, you want to be very respectful, I get that. But I think it's time to move on and just stick with the titles that the legislation gives. Order of business, yes, of course, order of business should include public forum.
I'm not sure I have that right for right of reply.
I didn't get a chance.
Move an extension.
Well, wait a minute, Councillor Grove. I've called right of reply.
I think I am.
Yes, yes. So I'm sorry, that's closed debate.
Mayor, that I was asked not to speak and I would have some minutes in relation to my opening address because I was cut short by people who didn't want me to continue.
Thank you, Councillor Lake. I'll put the amendment. Moved Councillor Grove, seconded Councillor Zeta. All those in favour? Aye. Against? I'll call for a division. All those in favour? Councillor Addy, Councillor Zareka, Councillor Rami, Councillor Grove, Councillor Zeta, Councillor Garrard, Councillor Sarkis and Councillor Cummings. Those against? Councillor Campbell, Councillor Christou, Councillor Hammond, Councillor Saha, Councillor Lake, Councillor Wong, Councillor Elmore. I declare the amendment carried. The amendment now becomes the motion. All those in favour? Aye. Against? No. I declare the motion carried. Call for a division, which would take two councils of the rise if you're going by the code of meeting practice, but I'll call for a division. No, still, if you call for a division. But no, it's all right. Division called. Councillor, all those in favour of the motion, Councillor Addy, Councillor Zareka, Councillor Rami, Councillor Grove, Councillor Zeta, Councillor Garrard, Councillor Sarkis and Councillor Cummings. Those against? Councillor Campbell, Councillor Christie, Councillor Hammond, Councillor Saha, Councillor Lake, Councillor Wong and Councillor Elmore. I declare the motion carried. Thank you. Councillor Zareka, the renewal and establishment of alcohol-free zones.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I won't be standing today. I've watched I had a boring night one night, and I was watching the YouTube replay of the last meeting, and you couldn't hear me when I was standing up. So either we attend on the microphones, or I remain seating. Can we move for the adoption? I've worked very hard for this, done a lot of research to get this through, and I want to thank the staff for the effort that they've put behind it, because it's quite thorough, and I commend the general manager for this, and the director. Can we? I move.
Before you do, Councillor Zareka, is that a second, Councillor?
Yeah.
Thank you. Continue, please.
I move for the adoption of the recommendation.
Thank you. Further discussion? No. Councillor Sarkis.
Mr Mayor, I too would like to commend the council officers on the report presented. Many that were in the former Holroyd Council would know that I was a massive advocate of the alcohol-free zones, and regularly called for updates for the Sarah Daniels Court and many of the other areas that were zoned as alcohol-free, be it in the Hilltop area, in the Marylands precinct, in Pendle Hill, Toongabbie and Wentworthville. Mr Mayor, but I need to go on and say, even with the work that we do as a council, these alcohol-free zones are only as good as the patrol that they get and the attention they get from the authorities at B. That means, Mr Mayor, the police, and I don't know what jurisdiction our rangers have in patrolling this as well. But we can put in all the laws we want and produce all the great reports that we have before us. But if they're not policed, if they're not followed through, then it's a waste of time and money. So, Mr Mayor, although I wholeheartedly support this, I would ask that we have regular consultations with police with respect to these alcohol-free zones, and if that could be added into the motion, which I'm sure the mover would have no hesitation in accepting, but that's only what I think. Regular consultations with police with respect to these alcohol-free zones and their enforcement thereof. Mr Mayor, I think it would be great to have maybe a quarterly report from the police as to what's happening with these zones as well. You know, how many people have they stopped in this area and how many people have they stopped? Pretty similar, Mr Mayor, to what we have with what we have at the moment with the police, where it comes to vandalism in the area and you know, theft in the area. They give us reports. So if they can give us reports on how many people they're stopping in these alcohol-free zones, it gives us an indication, Mr Mayor, of how successful our motions and our policies and procedures are with the local community.
Thank you, and just for your information, we do, the senior management team and myself, have monthly meetings with the two area commands that cover Cumberland, and we will make sure that that's brought to their attention. Councillor Zareka, do you accept that amendment? Thank you. Councillor Elmore?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I certainly support the recommendation that these alcohol-free zones be re-established, especially ones that are expiring soon around Granville, Guildford, Marylands and Granville. But the question I have is, who's responsible for the enforcement of these zones? As council officers, council rangers, do they have any authority? You didn't get an answer.
Mr Covers, but I am mindful that in the past, and I might be speaking out of turn now, that we were always cautious to make sure that the safety of our officers were paramount, but I'll hand over to Mr Covers.
Through you, Mr Mayor, the Local Government Act provides authorisation to members of the New South Wales Police Force to enforce the alcohol-free zones.
And what is the penalty if someone breaches it? Does anybody know? Because I don't know.
Ms Endicott?
Through you, Mr Mayor, there were recent changes in the legislation which means that any person observed to be drinking in an alcohol-free zone may have the alcohol in their possession immediately seized and tipped out or otherwise disposed of. So it does not prevent the consumption of alcohol, but it's basically they can confiscate and seize the alcohol.
Okay, so if a person is caught, I suppose you'd say, by a person in authority, police or council officer, that the alcohol is to be poured out, poured down the drain or something, or disposed of environmentally, and the person told to get on their way.
Ms. Endicott.
Through you, Mr Mayor, the exact wording is that they may have the alcohol in their possession immediately seized and tipped out or otherwise disposed of.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Sarkis, you have had a speech. Is this a question?
Mr Mayor, I want to give an example in response to the question that was asked by...
If you could be very brief, because we're mindful of the time.
Mr Mayor, with Sarah Daniels Court, you've very regularly had people who have consumed a whole heap of alcohol and they're actually drunk. So when the cops come out there, not only do they dispose of the alcohol that they have there, but they actually take them back to the police station, sometimes get the ambulance to come and take them because they're that affected by alcohol. So these alcohol-free zones actually work really well.
Thank you, Councillor Sarkis. Further discussion? No further discussion. Right of reply, Councillor Zareka?
No.
No. I'll put it then. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. Councillor Lake, the asbestos policy.
I'll second that.
Seconded, Councillor. Well, I'd like to hear what Councillor Lake is going to move.
I'll move that it go on public exhibition. I'll move the recommendation, Mr Mayor, and also when it...
Already got a second. Thank
when
you,
it, and further that when it comes back for report, that we also receive a report on the training and implementation of the policy.
Okay, do you accept that?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Further discussion? No further discussion. I'll put it. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. Councillor Sarkis, have you been able to find the item in the Traffic Committee you wish to discuss? Let me get to the Traffic Committee first.
Sorry, we're not doing road names for...
It's already been done, Councillor Sarkis.
Okay, I did run a little bit late. Mr Mayor, it was CTC 1815.
1815.
So if you've got these booklet, it's page 401.
1815, which is the Carlton Street Bramble proposed peak.
Correct, Mr Mayor.
Okay, so are there any other items?
18020.
18020, which is the Bunnings Warehouse field proposed.
Bangor Street.
Oh, Bangor Street. Where am I? What? 18.
413, I think it is.
Page 429.
No, 413. Is it?
So that's the Bangor Street, Guildford, Councillor Garrard.
That's it.
Any other items council wish to discuss? 16, which is Rawson Street. We'll run through it. Garrard. What was your other one, Councillor? At 38. 38. 38. Thank you, Councillor. 38. The Haven Street, Marylands. Is that? Item CTC 18-038.
Yeah. Mr Mayor, can I just...
One moment, I want to establish.
Sure.
Yeah, Haven Street. Well, you got the wrong number.
Then I may have the wrong number, Mr Mayor.
Okay. You got Rawson Street above it, 37.
That must be 37.
Okay.
That Rawson Street and...
122 in the report. Rawson Street, Auburn, extension of right turning lane into the traffic signals with South Parade.
That's the one.
Okay.
It's actually not Rawson, it's actually...
Well, we'll talk to the engineers when we get those items up. But just so we're clear, we have Councillor Sarkis wishing to discuss Carlton Street, Granville. Let's just get the rest of the paper out of the way, and then we'll have the numbers for each page. But I'm just being clear. So, and then Councillor Addy with Rawson Street. Then Councillor Garrard with Bangor Street. Then Councillor Atty with Rawson Street again for the third last item. So can I have a mover for all the other items? I've got moved Councillor Sarkis, seconded Councillor Zareka, that the others be moved in an omnibus.
Invited to the meeting this time?
I believe that is the case, and I haven't heard no complaints. I believe it was very, very efficient. So and move through. So I'll put those. Moved Councillor Sarkis, seconded Councillor Zareka. All those in favour? Against? Declare it carried. I'll run in order.
As it was going to be moved as part of the omnibus, nobody indicated earlier, I didn't have a conflict. But now that Bangor Street's been pulled out, I do own a property in that street, so I'll declare a significant non-pecuniary interest if it's only to do with traffic. And I will leave the chamber when we get to it, Mr. Mayor.
Bangor Street. Okay.
Correct, Mr. Mayor.
I'll mark that. So, okay, all right. When we get there, I'll ask you to vacate. Okay, so we'll start with Councillor Sarkis, your item, Carlton Street, Granville, proposed. 50 in the report.
Jeez, mine is 401.
No, that's the whole paper, Councillor Sarkis.
All right, okay. So, Mr. Mayor, first of all, through you, I'd like to commend the chair of the Traffic Committee on the work that they've done, and the Traffic Committee as a whole in what they've achieved through their works with the local police and other authorities. Mr. Mayor, I brought this matter of Carlton Street to the chamber some weeks ago, and it was with respect to the congestion of traffic in peak hours. They've met and they've decided that what we decided as a council as an urgent matter of urgency was appropriate, and they've now put forward to us a number of signs that they want to install to control these congestions during peak hours. What I perhaps failed to do, Mr. Mayor, was say that it's not only in front of the police station, but perhaps we need to go back all the way to Mary Street, which is, if you know Carlton Street, and as it comes down from William Street, so you've got the school there on the left, and then you've got that little bend on the road before it goes back out straight. So at that little bend, there's a crossing, a pedestrian crossing. So I'm proposing, Mr. Mayor, that we accept what we have before us here, but we also ask the Traffic Committee to consider extending during the same times that clearway all the way back to Mary Street, because again, I may have failed in putting this forward at the time. That's where the congestion actually starts. So if we just clear in front of the police station, you've still got car parking spots in front of some of the residential houses up the street. Now, they've all got driveways and car parking areas, so there's no reason for the cars to be on the street during that time. I wasn't merely picking on the police station's position. It's the actual street right back to Mary Street that we need to look at this point. And so I'd ask that we accept this report, but in response, ask the Traffic Committee to consider extending that clearway during the same times up to Mary Street.
Mr. Fitzgerald, if you take that on board.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we're happy to take that on board.
Thank you. So now I've got Councillor Rami has seconded that. Is there any discussion? No discussion. I'll put it. All those in favour? Against? Declare it carried. Councillor, we've got Rawson Street, Auburn Extension, which is on page 54. Councillor Addy.
Mr Mayor, can I suggest to our IT staff, unrelated to this motion, to please find a way we can actually get to pages quicker on our business papers electronically? It's been a pain trying to find where I am on this document, having to scroll through 100 and something odd pages to get there. Sorry? Thank you. Mr Mayor, with respect to the no right turn, I understand that apparently the comments say that local members' representatives indicated that the existing times are satisfactory and no changes are required at the present, and the members agreed. However, I disagree. The reason that I am actually the person who requested this be looked at, and the reason being that I wanted to shift it back to 2:30 is because this is the time in which most people go to pick up their kids from school. And I know that school zones are between 2 and 4 o'clock, in some places 2:30 to 4:30, and of course there's one in Mary Lane's between 12 and 2:30, and I don't know why, but anyway, it's another story for another day. The reason I asked for the no right turn there is because a lot of parents are taking a huge risk cutting across the intersections of Kahila Road and Yalowry Street, trying to get to their kids at school at those times. And that's why I requested that we actually have the no right turn extended, so they have to go down to Hampstead, which now has been approved as part of these documents, so there is a dedicated right-hand turn lane, and allow them to come the back way and back up to the school. So what I'd like to do is for the staff is to look at that with the issue with respect of school kids and during school hours to extend to that time. That's the way that's travelling south. That's it for that one, Mr. Mayor.
Before I ask for a second, Mr. Fitzgerald, do you have a clear understanding of what Councillor Addy is suggesting?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we understand that. We would generally withdraw this section of the local traffic committee report, and we would submit it back to the committee for review at a later date, considering Councillor Addy's comments.
Thank you.
Before I do, if it's a withdrawal, if the officers are agreeing to a withdrawal, then yes, then we can. Councillor Campbell.
I opposed extending the no right turn period because I think having no right turn for 3 streets in a row is overkill. And the reason why it was introduced, I was on the traffic committee when those no right turns were introduced in the first place, and I later on realised that it was overkill for the problem that existed. Traffic does tend to back up while people are waiting to turn right, and when it backs right up to the bridge, it causes a problem. And so it's sensible to have 1 or 2 no right turns during the peak period, but to take it all the way down to Hampstead Street is overkill. And there is a problem in turning right only for part of the time. And that's because you get a bank of traffic coming up Rawson Street when the traffic lights change at the intersection of Rawson Street and Parramatta Road. And traffic comes up there, and when the lights change again, there's no traffic for a long time. And it's very easy for people to cut across. So you are banning right-hand turns for a fairly length of time when there's absolutely nothing coming in the opposite direction because of what's going on at the traffic lights of the intersection of Rawson Street and Parramatta Road. I think actually the best solution to the problem would be to change the phasing of the lights at that intersection so that they change twice as often for half the length of time, and then you'll get a more even flow of traffic along there and you wouldn't get that build-up. So that's an explanation. I'm not asking that be done, but that is would be the most sensible solution to the problem. But to have people having to all go down to Hampstead Street, it doesn't matter, wherever they happen to turn right, they will be cutting across oncoming traffic if there happens to be any oncoming. So whether they cut across that altogether at Hampstead Road or they do it at let's say 3 streets at the same time, and I think if you've got some cars going turning right at that intersection, some turning right at the intersection before it, you're going to clear a bit of traffic a bit faster than you would if you try to funnel everyone into a right-hand turn lane where there is no traffic light. They're going to have to cut across any oncoming traffic. So I don't think that's going to solve the problem, and I really have doubts about having the no right-hand turn sign at all of those streets for the periods that they are there now. But I won't say that that should change, leave it alone, just don't extend it.
Can I make a suggestion that, well, one moment, the item is proposed to be withdrawn by the officer. I would suggest that the interested parties and those interested on the traffic committee have a site inspection, and then discuss it at the next traffic committee. Does that seem appropriate?
Can I comment on that as well?
You can, Councillor Addy.
Hello, Mayor. Thank you, Mayor. Mayor, see how stupid it sounds? Lord Cummings, I totally disagree with what Councillor Campbell just stated. I mean, maybe Councillor Campbell should divulge it actually lives in one of those streets and there might be a conflict of interest. However, the 2:30 zone is extending that by 1 hour. That's the only issue. I've timed driving down Rawson Road, and by the way, I don't need a site inspection. I actually take Rawson Road 6 times a day, every single day, and I have been doing that for 10 years. I know exactly what I'm talking about. I don't have to be a traffic engineer to tell you what's going on. The issue with Rawson Road is the actual parents are cutting across through Kahilla and Carabarran, etc., going through that little, trying to get through to the schools and come the back way and try and move away from the mainstream traffic. Now, if you actually turn right into one of those streets, you'll notice that a few years back, Council in their infinite wisdom, the traffic committee back then, which I believe you were on as well, has changed the way in which you start and stop all the way through those streets. So, for example, in the past, Carabarran, Kahilla, etc., were a straight run. Now you get to the next street, it's actually a stop sign. You get to the next street, it's a stop sign. You get to the third street, it's a stop sign as you go along. The next street, it's the alternate street. So if the first street has a stop sign in Carabar, in Kahilla, it's the second street that's got a stop sign. It actually takes you 3 to 4 minutes longer if you turn into one of those streets to get to the school. If you go down Hampstead Road, there's no speed humps, there's nothing there. Turn right, there's no stop signs or anything else, and come back up one of the streets, you get to the school a lot faster. The issue is that it is backing up all the way. You want to go do a site inspection, go and try and find somewhere to park in the first place to actually do a site inspection on those streets, because you can't. Yeah. Which leads me to my next point at 37, which I'll explain to you in a second about the other issue there. You cannot get anywhere there. You cannot park anywhere there. There are cars parked within 3 metres of each corner.
I know.
Which causes an issue.
I understand, Councillor Addy, but
I've been through there.
You've got plenty of local knowledge, as do Councillor Campbell.
Councillor Campbell lives there technically.
The officers have indicated they wish to withdraw.
Correct.
I believe you need to give the officers your knowledge at the appropriate time.
I have no problem in taking the Minister for Public Car Parking with me anytime you want.
Okay, but right now, I believe there's no need for debate. Thank you.
So withdrawing it, and then we go and have a look? Okay,
yes,
fine.
Thank you.
Can I go to the next one?
No, you can't, because...
I have two.
No, you've got, you're now got to go in line. We're running through in order.
No, you said, you're going through all of the actual items?
Yes.
See, Mr. Min,
so, Councillor Sarkis, no, I'm running as the way it should. Now that Councillor Sarkis has left the chamber, Councillor Garrard, Bangor Street, Guildford. And for those who are going through the paper, page 62. 62 of the report. Look at the top of the...
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Garrard.
Mr Mayor, I'd move the recommendation with the following changes. That is that the Cumberland Traffic Committee recommends the installation of traffic calming devices in Bangor Street, Guildford, not Greystones,
Thank you.
Be approved, and a scheme be developed in consultation with residents, deleting clauses 2 and 3. As I understand, Mr Mayor, the community in that area certainly are experiencing a lot of anti-social behaviour. The original recommendation is to wait and see another 12 months and see what it's like. Well, I think the area experts down there are in fact well aware of what it's been like for the last 12 months, Neighbourhoods are like this, they can change their nature. I understand, and also there's been numerous comments to the police in regards to the behaviour that's happening in Bangor Street. So in relation to community concerns that I've been made aware of, I'm moving that resolution. Thank you.
Councillor Garrard, if we could make it that the council and not the traffic committee, because I believe it would have to be done now by the council.
The council recommend, yeah.
Yep. And any further comments, Mr. Fitzgerald? Can't we just expedite it, that the council moves?
We can, but it needs to go back to the committee, and then we've got to notify the RMS and the police that there's been a decision.
Well, first of all, I'll ask for a second for councillor.
I'll add that to the motion.
Later.
So just so we're clear though, you know, the decision from live is not overturnable by this. Not my
Councillor Fitzgerald. Mr. Fitzgerald.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, my understanding of the guide to the operation of the local traffic committee set forth by the RMS is that if the council wishes to set forth a decision or overturn a decision of the committee, it must be reported back to the RMS.
Yeah.
And then the RMS has the right to petition, and then the chairperson's decision of the committee is binding.
Who's the chairperson?
Well, they didn't even turn up at the last meeting.
Yeah. You better make sure he gets an invite.
So, council, do we have a clear understanding of that? Okay. Is there any further discussion? No further discussion. Right of reply, Councillor Garrard?
Nothing, thank you.
I'll put it. All those in favour? Against? Declare it carried. Could we get back Councillor Sarkis, please? Is Councillor Addy, Rawson Street, Auburn, extension of right turning lane and traffic signals with South Parade. 122.
190 something, 489.
It's 489 at the bottom.
Thank you, Lord Cummings. There we go. Thank you. Mr. Mayor, look, I've seen what the report actually stated on this, and I forgot to actually thank Mr. Garrard, Councillor Garrard, for all the effort that he does put into the traffic committee, because I know the last one there, the way he handled that committee, I actually have to commend him for putting the other members in line. However, I don't agree with the actual recommendation on this. I'll tell you why, and this is also happening at another intersection, which I'd also like the staff to have a look at. When you actually park your vehicle, or sort of stop your vehicle at that light in that middle lane, which actually travels forward and to the right, the way in which the traffic signals are actually working, if you want to go straight ahead and the lights are red, but you're in that single middle lane, your right arrow actually comes on for you, the green arrow comes on for you to turn right. But the signal to go ahead doesn't actually come on. So the traffic signals are actually undertaken in a way that their intention was to actually have both those lanes turn right. And of an afternoon in the morning, the traffic is so dense that there are people trying to get out of Carabara and Kahilla and everywhere else, trying to get into those two lanes to cut across and actually turn right. So I'd like the traffic committee to go back and have a look. One, either A, change the actual way the signals work, because if you're in that middle lane and you want to turn right, you want to go ahead, and the lights are red, you actually get a green right turn signal. You'll never get a green light to go straight. So if in some cases, if you're sitting there at some time when there's no traffic, you're actually stuck there, unless you go back into the left lane. And that is the same problem you face on Marylands Road at the intersection of Woodville Road between the petrol station and McDonald's, the Woolworths petrol station. If you're in the left lane and you want to turn right, because you're allowed to, the signals won't allow you to if you're the only car there. Your left indicator comes on to green, so you can actually turn the actual green light. it'll never come on to turn right. So something has to be looked at in those signals on both those intersections. And I still believe that because of the amount of traffic that goes through here, in non-peak hour traffic, you still have more traffic turning right than actually going ahead. Now, to alleviate the problem as well, I also identified another issue which relates to this, and because of a lot of people trying to run through Carabara and Cahill and everywhere else, on the left-hand side of Rawson Road, travelling back into Auburn, not back to Parramatta Road, the clearway signs are not there. Yesterday, or the day before yesterday, at exactly 5:15, the traffic was so horrendous that even Hampstead Road was backed up to Harvey Norman, because someone in their infinite wisdom decided to park their vehicle, where they're illegally allowed to, on Rawson Road, approximately 40 metres from the intersection of the bridge, and every single car was veered into one lane before it can go back into three. And that's caused a traffic jam all the way to Harvey Norman and also all the way down to Parramatta Road. So we need to also put in place to fix this problem and assist this problem, a clear way on the left-hand side during peak hours as well. And stopping people there was only one car. People must understand that during peak hour traffic, you don't park a car in the middle of the road because a lot of accidents do occur there. So we need to also install clearways on that side as well to stop people from parking and clogging up the traffic back to one lane, and we're trying to actually let traffic flow through. That was it for that one.
Can I get a second for that? Second, Councillor Zaraki.
Yeah, we can. And the third one as well.
Down the road.
Mr. Fitzgerald. One moment, I just want to get a comment off the officer if he's...
Oh, sorry, my apologies. Through you, Mr. Mayor, I just sought to clarify from Councillor Addy if he was accepting the recommendation of the report or making an amendment to it. If he...
Well, the actual recommendation is that the extension of the right turn on the north but actually says we approved. My apologies. I actually saw that it actually wasn't allowed to go through.
That's approved.
Oh, it is approved, sorry. They're note taken that it's okay. Sorry about that. But I still
Thank
want them
you.
to have a look at that clearway zone because the clearway is actually causing the problem as well.
So we've got a motion as is, as written. Moved Councillor Addy, second Councillor Zaraka.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, I was actually partly right. I actually wanted that middle lane to also be dedicated to right turn lane.
Could we move that, move what is, and then...
And add to that, yes.
Yes. Sorry, I've got Councillor Grove and then Councillor Campbell. Councillor Grove?
My question, I'm referring to the diagram on 491, and it just follows up on what Councillor Atty is saying. So we appear to have two lanes and a right turn lane that you can veer off in if you're coming from towards Caraba Road. The lane that runs closest to the curb, is that no parking, no stopping, or is there street parking provided for?
Miss,
Yeah.
Yes, yeah, on the left.
Mr. Fitzgerald?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it's timed parking at the moment, so there's restrictions on the parking hours you can park there.
So, and this, I'd be open to considering it as a clearway. The question I would have would become, I wouldn't want people being forced into a forced right turn lane, which would be the middle lane, if there's a car parked there. I'm open. I'll let the locals determine traffic in that neck of the woods. But if we could have just some comment on what that would entail. If you've got capacity, and I believe that there would be capacity issues in this part of Auburn, perhaps street parking is something that needs to be consideration for another day.
Thank you, Councillor Grove. Councillor Campbell, then Councillor Sarkis.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, Councillor Addy suggested that the middle lane must turn right. Is that right? Yes, I actually raised that during the traffic committee meeting, and I think it makes a lot of sense because that middle lane, I'd say more than 90%, almost all of the traffic in that middle lane does turn right anyway, but you occasionally get the odd car that wants to go straight ahead and they're in the way. So and all the traffic that wants to go straight ahead, if they were in the curbside lane, it'd make very little difference to the traffic in the curbside lane. I might say that on my way here this afternoon, someone in that curbside lane cut across and did a right-hand turn right in front of me as I was stopping at the red light. But anyway, so that makes a lot of sense, therefore I support that.
Councillor Campbell, Councillor Sarkis.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, bringing me up on my... I have concerns when you have 3 lanes and you're going to dedicate 2 to turning right. Then I'd have to go with what I believe it was Councillor Grove said, and you'd have to implement a clearway there for that curbside lane. Because if 2 lanes are going right and the only lane that can allow you to go straight has cars parked in it, then what do you do? Sure.
That's okay. If you look at the map, where it says Caraba Road, between Caraba Road and the set of lights where the right turn lanes end, that's actually no stopping. You can't stop there. The issue is actually before Caraba Road, where the first 15 metres is actually, well, the rest of it is actually time parking, which Mr. Fitzgerald actually stated is. However, that time parking is only in the morning, not in the afternoon. There's only time parking in the morning. So if we understand there's going to be issues in the morning, what happens to the afternoon traffic? That's what I'm trying to implement. Also, of an afternoon, they can't park on the left-hand side. Because if someone parks on that just before Caraba Road, which it did the other day, then you only have 1 lane up Rawson Road for 3 people, actually 3 lanes to converge into 1. And that's where the traffic's being created. So that, I think that actually helps Councillor Sarkis with the explanation, because you cannot park between Caraba and the bridge. That's actually no stopping.
And I believe that this is all going to be discussed again at the Traffic Committee, and I'm sure the appropriate councillors will make the appropriate comments. Mr. Fitzgerald.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, and at risk of potentially sounding like I'm debating the matter, there's 2 issues I see with the resolution as it's written on the screen there. The report for the Local Traffic Committee at the moment calls for effectively the construction or demolition of part of a centre island, which has been approved by the committee. If I interpret what the council's requesting at the moment, and that is a further consideration be given to having 2 right-hand turn lanes, we'd have to look at the traffic modelling, we'd have to look at, and so could I suggest that that rather than the item be returned to the Traffic Committee, that the recommendations are adopted and that the staff submit a separate report to the Traffic Committee highlighting those concerns and taking on board the comments of the council.
That's fine. But clearway zone and middle lane become right hand. That's fine, yes.
Yep. So you accept that, Councillor Raddy?
Fine. I actually don't want to go back. I don't want to go back. I want to make some changes.
Right. All right. All right.
Yeah.
Any further discussion? No further discussion. I'll put it. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Declare it carried. Councillor, that finishes, I believe, the Traffic Committee. Councillor Zareka, notice of motion of sister city and relationship.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm fairly excited about this motion. As you've received the correspondence which you sent around to all the councillors, the presidency of the Republic of Turkey has invited the mayor and councillors and the general manager to as a delegation to visit Turkey. In the letter it says, I believe that it's 103rd anniversary of the Çanakkale land battles. I would say it's more appropriate to be the 100th anniversary of the end of the war, and a timely occasion for us to visit Gallipoli, which is part of the Çanakkale province. They also say, I'm confident that such a visit will be an important opportunity to explore possibilities of a new sister city relationship between Cumberland and its counterparts in Turkey. As I said, I'm very, very excited about this because to get this sort of correspondence from that level at the speed that we did was breathtaking. That's the invitation from a country which I consider to be the 5th most powerful country in the world. and I'd like council to support me on this motion. I mean, I've got quite a bit to say about it. I would prefer, given the time of the evening, that I answer questions rather than.
It's already seconded.
I didn't. Well, I only had Councillor Zareka. I didn't.
It says here you agree.
Well, no, I support it, but I can't second it. So, yeah, thank you, Councillor Sarkis. Before we continue, and I do have a call from Councillor Elmore, and we do, Council, as Councillor Zareka has indicated, we had the correspondence from the Consular General of the Republic of Turkey has been circulated. I know I have asked for the interested councillors who are willing to take up this offer. Is there any questions before I ask which councillors are interested in travelling? Councillor Elmore, you? No? Okay. Well, maybe we'll ask if we'll get the questions out of the way, and then we'll see who's interested in travelling.
I'm interested in saying a few things, but I understand there were questions at the briefing. So.
Well, I'll hand over to the acting general manager just to clarify, because I know in a general discussion last night there were some concerns of some legal perspectives. So, Mr. McNulty.
Mr. Mayor, the question was asked about potential conflicts of interest relating to a planning proposal for a school in Auburn. I've sought some advice on that today and have been verbally advised. I'm seeking to get that in writing, but haven't received it. I've just checked my emails. The verbal advice was, as neither the applicant for that planning proposal nor the owner of the site is Turkey, the government of Turkey, the conflict of interest doesn't arise. The advice also is that any councillor or staff member who travel would have to declare the trip on their returns, conflict of interest returns, or pecuniary interest returns, sorry, and if and when the planning proposal comes back before council, and just to advise, the planning proposal has received gateway approval subject to conditions, and the council is meeting with the applicant this week to discuss how those conditions are going to be addressed. When that does come back for council, any council that was concerned about the issue of the government of Turkey being involved in that proposal and who did travel to Turkey would be, I guess, obliged at that time to declare a probably non-pecuniary conflict of interest.
Questions or discussion? Councillor Grove.
I'm looking at the substance of Councillor Zareka's motion. The way I read it, there's not an immediate nexus between an offer from the government of Turkey and the motion before us. Is that fair to say?
I would agree that needs to be added to it now.
Does it need to be added now? I think we could argue that we're dealing with, we've got a sister city relationship which, sounds like it's with Gallipoli, which has significance beyond our Turkish community. Has quite a deal of merit, even if we didn't have a Turkish community in many ways, based on other communities. But I just want to be clear: is Councillor Zareka seeking to carry this motion independently of that discussion about the Turkish government's delegation?
Councillor Zareka.
Just so that I understand the question, are you saying that we can move the motion without having the invite?
Without referring to separate matters.
Well, they're not, because they move hand in hand. If I didn't have the invite, I couldn't discuss this, pertinent international issue.
Councillor Zareka has the floor.
Sure. I couldn't discuss this proposal with international government. I mean, we're not dealing with another local government. We're dealing with the highest level, of another country. So we'd need to have that motion, and we'd need to actually add a few more things to it, which I've discussed with the general manager and the mayor.
So is the delegation hosted by the Kanikali province, or is it hosted by their federal government?
No, it's the federal government.
Okay.
That's coming straight from the president's office.
Okay. No worries, I'll leave it for the...
I have Councillor Elmore, then Councillor Wang, and then Councillor Sarkis. Councillor Elmore.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Whilst I don't support sister cities in general, I thought they were a bit of a left over from the 70s and 80s where, you know, various people used to go and visit another country at the council's expense. I certainly do support this motion, and I'd like to thank Councillor Zaraka for putting this motion forward, because that way I can tell my personal story about my connection with Gallipoli and Auburn. 103 years ago, my grandfather, on my mother's side, he travelled to Turkey at the expense of the Commonwealth government. He landed in Gallipoli in August 1915. And if you want to look up his service record, his service number was 888, and he was pretty lucky because he got shot 3 times when he was at war in the First World War. But I've been there. I've already been there.
Council.
I've already been there.
I'm sorry, President Erdogan, if you're watching, that was a joke.
Just to continue on, my grandfather, he did return from the First World War, and he settled in. He got married to my grandmother, and they settled in Sheffield, number 53 Sheffield Street, Auburn, in the 1920s, where my mother and her sister and brother were born. They lived there for quite some time. And I'd like to share this story with the people from the Turkish community, because there certainly is a connection between Turkey and Auburn back in the 1940s, I think, when the Turkish people started to move to Auburn. And I continue to say this, if my grandfather he died in 1953, which is a long time ago, long before I was born and my sisters were born. But I think if you come back today, I think you'd see Auburn as a very, very different place and a much better place to live.
Thank you, Councillor Elmore. And having know a little bit of the history of that battle, well, your grandfather was very lucky, because he would have went straight into action, because Lone Pine was fought on in August, as was Chinook Bear, which the New Zealanders took the high ground and held it for a day, and then the Neck.
He was injured and he was wounded. He was on a hospital ship in the sea. I forget where the sea was, but after he recovered, they sent him to France to fight against.
To the Western Front, a very lucky man.
There was no holiday. There was no holiday.
Councillor Wong.
I just have a... Yep. I just have a question to the General Manager, through you, Mr. Mayor. In regards to the legal advice, what if the organisation that owns the land is majority funded by a foreign government?
Mr. McNulty.
Council has no knowledge of that. I mean, we don't know who funds any planning proposal. We don't know who funds anything necessarily that comes before us. And so, as I said, if a councillor was of the view when this planning proposal came to council, that was an issue that they were aware of or they suspected, and they had been part of this delegation, they would have to declare that as a non-pecuniary interest at the time, I would think.
Sorry. For example, there are a lot of organisations, a community organisation funded by foreign government owns property, like it's well-known community organisation that's part of or even has a strong connection with foreign government, owns property. In that scenario, I'm not talking about this school, I'm talking about a hypothetical example. Would that be a direct conflict of interest if
Mr. McNulty?
If council had the information that a property with a significant stakeholder in the property was owned by a foreign country, and this situation arose, and I guess that may change the advice.
Okay, thank you.
Canberra with the embassy sites.
Councillor Sarkis.
Yeah. Mr Mayor, I'd like to speak on behalf of the motion and in favour of the motion, but in saying that the Turkish people in the Auburn area and in Australia as a whole have contributed largely to the society we have here today, and we commend them on that, and we acknowledge the contribution they've given. With respect to the motion and forming a sister city relationship, I wholeheartedly support that. I also welcome the invite from the Turkish government for Cumberland Council to attend their 100-year anniversary or 102nd year Kankali province debacle that was there, if you like. But although the two are related, I do see how they can be separated so that we can accept one and we can accept the other without one impeding on the other. And I think that forming a sister city relationship, nobody here would have a problem with that. And so I would suggest or indicate to the mover that if you want to separate them, then you might get unanimous support for one and just get a majority support for the other, for example. And I think it might be worthwhile separating. However, if you decide to leave them both together, it can be done as well. I just think that by endorsing the sister city relationship, with solidarity in forming that, and then the invitation that's extended to the council, the mayor and councillors, to attend. And am I assuming, or is it incorrect to assume that that invitation is only the mayor and councillors, or is it extended to the general manager and officers?
Or his delegate?
Right. So I think one has I think one has a monetary essence to it that's beyond council, and one is within council. So forming the sister city is something that we can manage, and the other is something that we have nothing to do with, if you like, because they're inviting us. So I just think if we separate the two, it might be easier to deal with. Councillor Grove alluded to that, and I was thinking that when he brought it up, I thought, okay, it is the opportune time. So they are interrelated, but they can be separated and deal with one at a time through the same motion. No, not at all. I'm just saying.
Hear about the two being together anyway.
That's right.
At the moment, it's separate anyway.
Yeah. But
The way I read it was,
Councillor Sarkis, if I could just say that this motion was premised on the fact that we didn't at that point have the invitation. Now that we have the invitation, and indeed it was also premised on the fact that I was the only invited councillor. Now that we've got an invitation for the whole council, it changes the
dynamics.
The dynamics of it. Yeah.
We're dealing with the city here, not an actual motion for.
Yeah, but the invitation is in order for us to discuss inter alia, so amongst other things, the sister city relationship.
I understand. So we've got a motion here to actually start this process with the city. Put the motion forward. However, I'd like to state something for me, Mr. Mayor.
Well,
2 seconds, Mr. Mayor. Just look, we're actually digressing into a matter which has nothing to do with the actual motion at this stage. Okay, whether or not the Turkish government owns a property or not, we've done our searches, we've done our due diligence. The property is not owned by the Turkish government. It is owned by a group called Gallipoli Education Solutions, which then goes back to, I believe from memory, a religious group in Turkey, which has nothing to do with the government again. So it is not owned by the government. Misread it. When you use the term funding, a government funds something when they actually have an interest in that product or that item, and they actually have part ownership of that product. We need to be wary of the fact that it's not funding that governments do to actually religious groups or not-for-profit or NGOs. They provide grants. Providing grants doesn't mean there's any ownership there at all, which is what we do as well. We provide money, you can't call it funding, it's grants, to NFPs and NGOs. So please don't misconstrue the fact that they're getting money from wherever they're getting it from. They're grants only, and there is no vested interest by anyone like ourselves in providing grants to anyone. That's all it is. So we just put the motion, Mr. Mayor? Or close it, close it.
I've got Councillor Grove, then Councillor. Moved, Councillor Sarkis. Those in favour that the motion be put? Aye. Against? No. Show of hands. Those in favour that the motion be put? Councillor Sarkis, Councillor Garrard, Councillor Zeta. Those against? I declare the motion lost. Debate continues. Councillor Campbell.
Mr. Mayor, I'll address myself to the motion as it's written here, and a lot has been said about a separate, a distinct although related matter, which is not in front of us. So I'll just address myself to the whole question of sister city relationship. In principle, I'd support the sister city relationship, but my support would be conditional on how it's done. Auburn had a sister city relationship with Chinackley many years ago, and at the time that I first joined Auburn Council in 2004, the relationship was really dormant, and it remained that way ever since. So there are some problems with having sister city relationships, especially if you have a lot, and people are enthusiastic about it for a while, and then everyone loses interest, and the whole thing is dormant. Auburn Council did right to Chinackley not that long ago, because the whole sister city policy was under review in about 2015, I think, and we wrote to a number of sister cities, and I think Chinackley was one of those places which did not reply, and therefore they were struck off the list. So if there is going to be a sister city relationship, I'd like to see it successful and not go into abeyance once again. And if we're going to take it seriously, then a sister city relationship is not about a group of councillors travelling there and then a group from the other direction travelling there. It would involve such things as, let's say, cultural exchanges, for example, but both sides should look at the ways in which relations between the two cities can be strengthened and developed to the benefit of both parties. And that means putting in a bit of effort to it, and possibly having a community-based committee to oversee this and to develop that relationship. So, as I say, I would support this in principle, but caution people to not just get a great big burst of energy and let it die, as has happened again and again in the past with sister cities, but make sure it's either meaningful or don't bother going into it. Thank you.
Mr. Campbell, I've got Councillor Zareka, then Councillor Grove. Councillor Grove.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, I'll give my tentative support to the motion. My view is that we have a shared history or shared heritage with Gallipoli. It's a shared local heritage, particularly with the Auburn community. It's also a shared national heritage. You know, the two countries have a significant number of events that are of shared concern. I think that's a valuable story, and I think it's a story that our community and our ratepayers think is worthwhile telling. It's always been the feedback that I've got when talking to members of the community about Gallipoli. I've generally, and councillors from the former Holroyd Council will know that I've had reservations about incursions into foreign affairs at the local government level. I somewhat still share them, and I'll wait for a subsequent report to determine just how tentative my support is at that stage. In preparing the report, I would ask for some advice, and I think we do need a policy with how we deal with foreign delegations in this city, foreign visitors to the city, acts of soft diplomacy, no matter where they're coming from. I think we need a pipeline of advice if we're going to facilitate that from our national government. I don't think it's our role to contradict or try and supplement national policy. I think we should be compliant with it. We don't have that level of independence. We are Australians. And I would request that we, as part of that approach, get some sort of advice, preferably under separate cover from Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, about where we should be positioned, or even verbal advice when that report is considered. But that being said, I think of all the names that we have on sister city relationship listings from a previous report, I think Gallipoli trumps just about all the other foreign cities there. I would ask a question about the. I was going to ask a question about some pronunciations of those cities. I think I might do it after the meeting. There are some, and in that space, I could probably add a couple extra names in that space too. I would also flag that I think when it comes to relationships with other cities, our relationship with Hay and to an extent Oberon should always come first. We should certainly look at what we can do on our turf as the first priority. I think we actually drew, as Holroyd Council, a lot of credibility for the resource we invested into our country alliance. And were it not for the fact that we had a deal breaker discussion on mergers, we probably would have been held in quite high regard by the state government for that relationship. I suspect we were leading the state at that point in time, but we certainly weren't going to try and sacrifice our city to earn the extra smile. So on that basis, I'm happy to support the motion, but I'll look forward to the next report.
Thank you, Councillor Grave. Councillor Zaraka.
Mr. Mayor, yes. Ultimately, the sister city arrangement is a symbolic act, purely symbolism. It's an act of peace and reconciliation between former foes. It's intended to foster friendship and understanding between different cultures. That's to put it simply. I agree with Councillor Grove's comments. We're not trying to overstep our mark as a local government. We are a large government agency, as Councillor Grove pointed out, but we're definitely not trying to overstep our size or our responsibilities. This delegation will be a zero cost to council. It will not cost us anything. If you decide to fork out the costs of a ticket, that's up to you. The Republic of Turkey have kindly invited us, not only myself, but the entire council plus the general manager. What I'm proposing is fairly simple. It's just a memorandum of understanding. It doesn't have any legal implications. The only thing that stems from it are terms of agreement between the two countries, between the two, provincial council in Chanakali and Cumberland Council. But I'd like to say Gallipoli is also a poignant reminder of the sacrifices both sides have made. I travelled there last year and I met up with quite a few Aussies, and Gallipoli has become almost like a mecca for Australians. I've lost my momentum. If I could just add as well, Auburn has always honoured those that have passed in the horrible war. We've named the largest mosque in the southern hemisphere Gallipoli. We've renamed the street Gallipoli Parade. We've got numerous memorials dedicated to those fallen at Gallipoli. I mean, I don't want to spell how important Gallipoli is to us. And of course, yes, Gallipoli Street. Auburn is also home to a significant number of returned servicemen, particularly those that took residence in the government-built cottages following the war. There's also a high percentage of Turkish immigrants and returned servicemen in Auburn. And I would say that Gallipoli has come to hold a special spot in the hearts of residents of Auburn. I'd ask that you support me in honouring the diggers in the land of a former enemy and vice versa. And I think it's only fitting that we enter this MOU with Chanakali.
Thank you. That closes debate. I will put the notice of motion as written. Moved Councillor Zaraka, seconded Councillor Sarkis. All those in favour? Aye. Against? I'll declare that unanimously. Council, I believe because of the correspondence we've received from the Consulate General of the Republic of Turkey, we need probably a move of matter of urgency as those councillors that wish to take up this offer, and we'd also need a resolution whether the General Manager, the Acting General Manager or his delegate would be have permission to travel. Move Councillor Addy, seconded Councillor Zaraka as a matter of urgency. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried again unanimously. I will now ask for the interested councillors, and I'll start from Councillor Addy. The dates are 20th to the 28th. Certainly, Councillor.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the General Manager. Accepting this travel is it consistent with our gift and benefit policy?
Mr. McNulty.
It would have to be declared on the annual interest declaration, disclosure interest declaration.
Doesn't it in our gifts or benefit policy states that gifts or benefit of more than $20 are considered more than token value? Wherever possible, council officials are encouraged not to accept gifts, hospitality or other benefits of more than token value. However, in incidents where gifts are unable to be refused, the gifts will be disclosed and managed in accordance with the process outlined in this policy. So you can't refuse it?
Mr. Mayor, I would suggest that this isn't a gift as much as an invitation from a foreign government, but I'm happy to be told otherwise. But I mean, that's the advice, that's consistent with the advice I've been given.
Advice on that, please? Can we have a written advice on for email?
Thanks. We'll take the councillors that are interested, subject to the written advice, and then we'll move forward that way. So, Councillor Addy.
Mr. Mayor, just one thing before you. Problem. Now it's up to the guys over there. The issue is, and Councillor Zaraka, we spoke to Councillor Zaraka prior to this meeting, there is a very tight time schedule at the moment. The issue is also that if you wish to go, you've got to know by this Friday and hand in your passport shortly so you get your visa stamped on the passports. Okay, so yeah, I understand that, but that means that the officers have to get that information for us before Friday. Exactly.
Which Friday?
This coming Friday.
Tomorrow?
Yes.
After tomorrow.
Yes, so we've got the information by Friday. And then if you want, no, you can't. That's stopped. You cannot get a visa at the airport anymore. No,
you have to pay
that's gone.
$90.
The visas are here. You've got to get them. The Consul General is going to give us the visas because he's the Consul General. However, so yes, I am interested, and more than likely I'll say yes. But at this stage, I'm just waiting on the information to come through, and we would have to hand our passports over to Councillor Zaraka, who will then take them to the Consul General and get them organised.
Obviously, Councillor Zaraka, yes. Councillor Rami.
Sought leave for that appropriate period, and I also don't have any advice from the Australian government on taking up an invitation from the Turkish government, and yeah, I don't know whether I have to, but I would prefer to before coming
Okay, well, I take your point, so I take it you're declining? With the time restrictions.
At this stage, I can't say yes. Now, if I get advice over the next 24 hours, I'll let you know.
Okay. Councillor Zaraka. Zaydev, sorry. Thank you. Councillor Garrett. You're a definite no. You're a definite decline. Thank you. Councillor Sarkis.
But I'm already out of the country during that period, Mr Mayor.
Okay. Councillor Elmore.
I won't accept the invitation.
You
I will not accept
will
the
not.
invitation.
Okay, decline. Councillor Wong.
I can't say yes at the moment.
Okay. Councillor Lake.
I have a commitment with a consortium of Tamils who do a wonderful Anzac Day at Wentworthville.
Thank you. Councillor Saha.
No, Mr. Mayor, I'll not be able to join.
No.
No.
Councillor Hammond.
I will politely decline.
Councillor Christou. And Councillor Campbell.
No.
They're economy class, and I myself are declining because I've got other duties, unfortunately. Mr. McNulty will have that discretion if the council endorses the matter of urgency. So it'll be either him or the delegate he so wishes to choose. That's what I'm proposing, and I've got that. I believe it was Councillor Addy and you seconded. Oh, that was the matter of urgency? Yep. That's why it's part of the matter of urgency. So Councillor Addy moved, and I take it Councillor Zaraka seconded. Further discussion?
And please don't let it be with me. As his delegate.
No further discussion?
Unless it's a one-way ticket.
Right of reply, Councillor Addy?
Mr. Mayor, look, the only thing that I'd like to say, and it's interrelated as Councillor Campbell stated, and it's really not. However, Councillor Campbell did state, for a point of clarification, that we did not get anything from the Chanakali government with respect to the invitations back then. And however, we did. When I was mayor in 2012, they wrote to us and said yes. And if Councillor Campbell remembers correctly, we sent Councillor Batik on the 100th year anniversary, which was 3 years ago, to represent the council. She sought leave from council, and she went to Turkey as well, represented council there as well at Gallipoli. No, she actually, the letter came from the government, inviting all of us. We all said no, except her. So that was it, Mr. Mayor. Just put the motion forward.
Councillor Addy, and I'm mindful of the on advice, on legal advice, be added to the subject to written advice. Are there any others before we put that, like any that may consider once written advice has been received?
Just an issue of the written advice. Say subject to written legal.
Correct.
So the subject to written legal advice only if the government is paying that we may not.
Correct.
Sorry, so I would be, under that interested, I would need to explore it further.
Any more adjustments to the motion?
You know, if somebody else calls you tomorrow and says that they're interested, then you add them on.
Okay.
You know.
All right. And any other interested councillors? Whack in, please. No, we don't. So technically there should be no leave required. because there's no council meeting during that period. All right, with that, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Aye. Against? I declare that unanimously carried. Thank you, Council. Yes. Does any member of the public object to council moving into confidential session to discuss personal and commercial matters? No. Then can I have a motion that in accordance with section 10A, clause 2A and 2D of the Local Government Act, council move into closed session as the item relates to personal and commercial matters? Move councillor Sarkis, seconded councillor Addy. All those in favour? Aye. Against? Declare it carried. Council will have a 5-minute break. Thank you. Wait for the cast to start. We're ready?
We've been watching for the last 10 minutes.
Okay, thank you.
You even showed what you said about Councillor Lakeland thing as well.
Did it? Okay. Okay, all right, thank you. The council in closed session has resolved the following regarding the mayoral minute, the selection panel composition for the recruitment of the general manager. The recommendation that council endorses the creation of a selection panel comprising 6 councillors, including the mayor and deputy mayor, and an independent as per the parameters in this minute. Confirm which 4 councillors, and they are, in brackets, Councillor Addy, Zada, Hamid and Lake, aside from the mayor and deputy mayor who will form the panel. 3. Delegate the mayor to exercise the functions required to commence the recruitment process as outlined in the OLG guidelines for the appointment and oversight of the general managers, namely the approval of the information package including position description and also the approval of the advertisement for the role, and 4. Adopt the time frame outlined in attachment 2 of this report with minor changes if required, noting that the composition of the panel will need to consider the availability of the selected councillors to ensure the meetings of these milestones is not compromised, in brackets 5 councillors required for the culling of the applicants, full stop. I believe that no, it's already done, so it's moved that the council meeting close at 10:15. Thank you, councillors. Thank you, officers.